Hello, everyone. This is Aladdin. Today's stream is about ex-Muslims and what their reasoning for not believing in Islam is. Actually, now that I think about it, um, some of them might not even identify as ex-Muslim. They might just be in a situation where they're presumed Muslim, but they never quite believed to begin with. And I always get asked, does that mean that I'm an ex-Muslim? Does that not? So I guess we can talk about that if that kind of situation comes up. So yeah, the purpose of today's stream is to get you to talk about what it is that you find, unreasonable about Islam, or if reason was behind your lack of belief in Islam, and so on. And I'm going to start by reminding everybody, let's try to keep it to around 10 minutes each or so. We'll play it by ear. We'll see as we go, but just try to be mindful of the time just so everybody gets to contribute. As of right now, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We got 5 people in the waiting room. If you do want to join, please let me know in the waiting room. Just a brief overview of who you are, I suppose. So, one last thing I want to mention is I've got a splitting headache, so I might be a little bit slower today, and I'll try to focus on the comments as well. I'll do my best there. I'll try not to miss anything, but I won't always get to the comments as soon as they're posted. So, if I don't get to it immediately, I might get to it a little bit later. Anyhow, thank you everybody for joining, and I'm going to start with, let's see, what is the order that I had mentioned? We're going to start with Angra Shadow. I'm adding you to the stream in 3, 2, 1. Hi, Angra. How's it going?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. How are you doing, man?
I am good. How are you?
I'm well. But Ramadan is having to fast when you don't really believe is more exhausting than usual.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll start by saying the main thing that made me not believe or stop believing, I should say, is actually similar to your reasoning. You usually talk about how you ask those questions about other people and what would happen to them, and whether they will be punished for simply not believing or for simply being who they are. And if it's something that Islam is against, is that a sin? Like, it's not their fault. And so it's because of things like that that it made me start questioning, like, is this really the all-loving, all-merciful God?
Mm-hmm.
And then from then on, it's just snowballed, and I started realizing all the inconsistencies and how it doesn't really make much sense.
So, if I may ask, when in your life did that thought come to your mind?
I would say about 3 years ago, somewhere around that, when I was starting to because see, look, at the start, I used to be really religious, and I would say I didn't have that much empathy towards other people myself. But then I started talking to other people, people who aren't Muslim, people who belong to the LGBTQ community, for example. And because of that communication, it made me realize that they are actually people just like me. And they don't deserve the kind of treatment that Islam gives them. So yeah, it was ever since then that I started to question things.
When you say the kind of treatment that Islam gives them, I have the apologist in me would retort with, but Islam says to treat everybody nicely and so on. What did you think of that angle? What is it that you think Islam is treating them that is, I suppose, mistreating, as opposed to the way that you would expect or want them to be treated?
Well, it seems like Islam is the kind of system that claims that it knows what is best for you, but it doesn't actually take your feelings into consideration. It basically just pretends that it's treating them equally, when in reality it's it's looking down on them. It's arrogantly saying that, okay, this is who you are and this is how you should be treated because of that. But it doesn't actually it doesn't have any empathy regarding them.
Right. I don't know if that's exclusive to Islam, but it's one of the religions where that is very prevalent, I would say. Um, and something that you had mentioned, treating them equally, I'm not sure off the top of my head if this has always been a narrative or it's more of a new thing. Like in the beginning of the emergence of Islam, was it a narrative that Jews and dhimmis, dhimmis in general, are treated better than they would have been treated under other rulers? Do you know anything about that? Because when I think about it, I
Um,
think it's all just recent apologetics, in my opinion.
yeah, I think I tend to agree with that because when you look back on history and how it used to be, like there was definitely no equal treatment. Like it was very clear that like Jews and Christians and other kind of groups, they weren't they had to pay jizya and all that stuff, and that was like the best thing they could do. Otherwise, they had to convert to Islam to be considered equals.
And then they'd be considered hypocrites, right? Munafiqeen, if they don't actually believe in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which
I
like
was
that
just
is the funniest thing for me. It's like I always think about how the munafiq hadith about like the signs for a munafiq, and how it doesn't actually make any sense. Like I'm hiding my religion because I'm hiding the fact that I'm not religious, not because I'm a liar, because I would be killed if I said otherwise.
right. It's I was just reading the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah yesterday, and I was reading the tafsir about some of the very initial verses about munafiqeen, and a lot of the tafsir are talking about two different types of munafiqeen: the munafiqeen who actually don't believe and they're pretending to be Muslim for whatever gain, political gain, whatever it is that
Yeah,
was useful for them at the time. And then
yeah,
those who believe but have doubts and they're kind of in between and they're flip-flopping, or they're not sure but they continue being Muslim, and those were demonized too. And I'm thinking, so so what's wrong with those people? Like, why is it that the people who have doubts you're demonizing rather than explaining to them what it is that they're misunderstanding?
yeah,
um
exactly.
yeah,
It's always like it's always assuming what these other people are actually like, and like putting stamps on them. Like you often also like bring up examples of these simple characters in the Quran, the kuffar, who are like very simple one-dimensional characters, and it's so funny looking back on it because like they really don't make any sense. It's almost like they're written just to make Islam look good.
there's so much meme potential there. You have no idea. I have not tapped into that yet. But the amount of jokes that can be made about how you always see this, it's all very kind of by the book. Those people were evil and then they lost, and then and happily ever after the
Yeah,
believers win. It's pretty standard.
and
um
and they're always like described with things like, oh, they were arrogant, they were ignorant. They're always like portrayed as this, as either evil or stupid uh or these negative connotations. And in the mind of a Muslim, when they read these kind of stories, and this is just their idea of who a non-Muslim is, like it's hard for them to empathize with them. This is what happened to me. Like I used to just assume that they were just like these stories, that they knew Islam was the truth but chose to be ignorant about it, so they deserved it. But in reality, that's not the case.
and for people who are not following with us, because unfortunately there are Muslims who hear us talking about this and they say, so do you believe that these events happened or not? Do you believe that hell exists or not? Why are you so upset if hell doesn't actually exist? To clarify for those people, it's because it carries over into real life, right? Into
Yeah,
everyday life. This mentality, and a lot of Muslims, like I've always said, are better than Islam, and it's not all the time
yeah,
in all
absolutely.
Muslims. Yeah, obviously, like you weren't walking around being like, "Damn those kuffar, I hate them so much,"
Yeah,
but it just little things here and there. You think, well, of course a kafir is going to do that. Like they're arrogant, they're so and
yeah,
so, they just want to live life and worship their desires and all that
yeah.
stuff.
There are so many like weird beliefs that people around here where I live have about
Yeah.
people who aren't Muslim because of things like that.
The stereotypes and the stories and the myths are incredible. Like people have no idea. People in the English speaking world have no idea how prevalent these
Yeah.
stereotypes are. Um, one thing I wanted to ask you is, so you mentioned empathy, and that was one of the things that got you out, was having empathy for those people and realizing they're not the villain that they're painted to be, or as simple minded, as arrogant, and all that stuff. So, how has that changed your view of the world in general and of people since you had that realization?
I think I've become a lot more like aware of just the kind of struggles that different people go through. Like for example, gay people or trans people, uh, or just Jewish people, with all the terrible things that they've gone through across history. It just made me realize that the world doesn't just revolve around me and around Islam, which is something I used to believe. When you're a Muslim, you believe that you're basically the main character of the universe, that Allah created all of this for you, and you're supposed to be like the hero. And
Yeah.
we just see ourselves as victims of all these, like oh, the world is conspiring to hide Islam or to paint it in a negative light, when it's like it's not exactly like that.
Yeah. It's you see that narrative perpetuated in a lot of religions and groups that or cults that want to keep you in this idea that beware of the outside, right? Beware that that's going to lure you into to be more like them, which is even if it looks good,
Yeah,
right? It's bad.
yeah,
Um, like we've even rationalized Western, if you want to say, Western, use that word loosely, countries, if they're doing well, we think it's because God is giving them something in this life so that in the afterlife, they deserve all the torture or something of that sort.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
That's one of the funnier ones.
Funny to us, but unfortunately, really messed up when you think about it.
Yeah,
Um, a couple of things I want to touch on. So there was a comment here by Neo26, I suppose is how I pronounce it. I always thought, how can you treat someone nicely and think at the same time that they are so evil they deserve to go to hell? Cognitive dissonance. And I want to highlight that because I wanted to say it's not like all Muslims walk around thinking everybody deserves to go to hell and I'm going to treat them that way. Like the humanity in them it takes over most of the time. And the
yeah.
cognitive dissonance is a good thing in that case, but it's not a permanent solution.
Speaking from my perspective, when I used to be a devout believer, like I used to try not to think about stuff like that. Like I would, whenever the thought came to my head, like, okay, I know this person, they're very cool, and I like them or respect them, but they're probably gonna go to hell. Like I would just avoid thinking about that. I would hide away from that thought. So yeah, it's not like people are directly thinking that. In fact, I think if they were to think that and actually like sit down and consider it, they would realize that, hold on, like this doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. That's the number one thing that amazes me in all of my conversations with anyone who's some sort of a Muslim preacher. When I try to ask them about that, about the getting them to think about the other, right? And do they deserve hell? And what does that sin mean? What does being a good person mean? There's this blockage in their mind, unfortunately, where
Yeah,
their go-to answer is only Allah knows where everybody goes, and
yeah, yeah,
just
exactly.
circular stuff about we don't know. Maybe they're going to convert before they die. And I'm like, that's not the point, right?
Yeah, that's not the point.
So I suppose that's one way for someone to snap out of their religious belief is facing that cognitive dissonance is what happened to you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to rush you to leave or anything, but yeah, I just wanted to know if you had any other thoughts or anything else you wanted to mention.
I think like see like the big thing that actually like woke me up, aside from interacting with other people, was also just realizing that there isn't really any absolute truth in the world, that the truth depends on your perspective. And so it was a kind of a wake-up call for me to realize that the only reason I believe Islam is the truth is because I grew up with it, and it's not some fact that can't be you know disputed or anything. And so like I always say, like the only way for Muslims who are like who truly believe that Islam is the truth to actually be convinced otherwise is to slowly like discover and understand that there are as many perspectives as there are people, and every perspective is valid.
I don't know if I'd agree with every perspective is
Well,
valid.
when I say every perspective is
Yeah.
valid, I don't mean that like it's good, but it's more like that every perspective like it comes from a source that actually like makes sense.
In the person's mind, possibly,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
there is
Like
thought behind it. It's not
yeah,
as
like for
simple
that
as,
person,
yeah.
like that person isn't lying and or trying to act like they know the truth when they don't. Like for them, this is the truth, whether it be like a good thing or a bad thing, and we can only like we have to go through discussions to actually like understand each other's perspectives and which ones are harmful and which ones are not.
While I think there are dishonest people, I think that the presumption by Islam is that by default, if you disbelieve, that's denial, right? If you know the true message, so
Yeah,
called, then that is wrong. And I'd rather approach someone believing that they think that this is their truth, right?
yeah,
Even the preachers, the Muslim preachers, a lot of them or most of them, I genuinely believe that they actually believe in this stuff, even if it doesn't add up. So yeah, I think that's a better approach. uh, yeah, so I agree with you. Thank you for
yeah.
sharing that with us.
No worries. Thank you for hosting me.
Of course. Have a good day, and talk to you later.
Same to you.
Thanks. Bye bye. So, thank you again, Angra, for joining. We've got a bunch of callers in the back. Thank you for waiting. I will read a few comments that I either wanted to respond to or just highlight. Um, Thank you very much, I Luqman, for this super chat. Very generous of you. I really appreciate it. And let's go through the comments. So Robert was saying a lot of Muslims have changed their views on Jews and trans people after meeting me, and I respect that. And I like to remind myself of the fact that there is hope, right? People are not just one big block of believers. There's variation, and they don't necessarily have to, completely leave Islam to find this spot where they can at least understand your perspective and maybe come up with a new understanding of Islam that keeps them within the folds of the religion, but also, more. I don't even like using the word tolerant because tolerance implies that you're tolerating something that is bothersome. I don't know what the actual definition of the word means, but colloquially, if I'm tolerating my cats being annoying, that means that they're being annoying, right? So what I meant to say is I think there are a lot of Muslims that if they actually, and a lot of people in general, they actually were able to, in the right setting, in the right way, sit down and think about something or meet the person that they're thinking about, they will change their perspective in one way or another. A couple more comments to read before moving on to the next caller. Calisthenics Wade says, Allah is eternal, so denying Allah is an infinite crime worthy of an eternal torture, is what I heard someone say once. I've heard that a lot. So that's in response to how come a disbeliever deserves eternal hell. They say that it's about the scale of the crime. The crime scale is infinite because God is infinite and something along those lines. I would say the opposite, actually. And I this is not an original thought of mine. I think I've heard this example before. If you steal, if you're a poor man, right, who steals from um, a king who has lots and lots and lots of potato farms, and you steal a couple of potatoes, this king is so rich, he, even if you steal enough potatoes to feed yourself every single day till you die, he doesn't even notice because that's how much crop he has. Should you be punished infinitely? Should you be put to death because the king is so rich? If anything, it would be the opposite. The king would be or should be merciful, and because it doesn't harm him, the crime doesn't harm him as much, he would probably be more lenient. So that's just an example to make you think, why does God take it upon himself to be so petty to every single person? It's here's a better example. It's as if I went to my comments, and I have a small channel, but it's as if I had the biggest channel on YouTube, and I went to every single comment to fight with them and then get them banned and off the platform and go to their house and scare them. That's what Allah is doing. Like, how petty and sad is that? And that doesn't fit with the idea of a perfect God or a good God that we think of. So that's what I think about that. And last comment, KNB says, there's a line in Surah Al-Baqarah 262 that gets used a lot. It says basically, as long as you believe in one God, you don't go to hell. That still skirts the original point. It's not about whether you believe in three gods or one, or that's not the issue here. What they say that to make us feel better about, oh, all monotheists, I guess, have a shot at going to heaven, which is very debatable, but that's besides the point, and it's such a distraction. We're talking about how someone who reasonably, honestly, doesn't believe in a very suspicious message among many others, that's not a fault of theirs, and it's not something that deserves torture. So to say, no, the scope is a little bit wider. If you're a monotheist, you still might get a shot. It doesn't really, contribute to anything. And Osiris, thank you for the super chat as well. Appreciate it. Okay, so I am going to get to the next caller. And I believe the next caller is Soleil Apostate. He's been on the channel before. And I'll let him introduce himself. 3, 2, 1. Hey, Soleil, how's it going? Hi.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I can introduce myself. I'm a French Algerian ex-Muslim. I live in France. And yes, I wanted to speak with you about why I don't believe. And I wanted to share also a message to all ex-Muslims that during this month, during the Ramadan, it can be really hard. Because me, for example, I go to my parents' home every weekend because I am a mama's boy, how you say it. And yes, I have to pretend to do Ramadan. And during the dinner, I have my father. He says, why don't you pray? And it's really hard sometimes. I have to stay silent and bear. Yes, it can be really hard. So yeah, I wanted to share this with you because I live it. And yes, why I don't believe in Islam. There are a lot of things. But first, I wanted to talk about the abrogation in the Quran. There is a verse who says that if there is a better verse, it can replace the last one. I have it there.
Right.
Sorry. Up. Yes. It is Surah 2, verse 106. We never nullify a verse, nor cause it to be forgotten, unless we bring one better than it, or similar to it. For me, it is the ultimate truth that the Quran is human, because God, he cannot change his mind. That one day it is blue and tomorrow it is red. It is impossible that the perfect being could change his mind in his message. So for me, with this verse, everything fell apart for me. It was really important.
Well, I want to play devil's advocate for a second and then get your thoughts on it. So the answer to that usually is, well, that's because the Quran was dynamic and it was, changing to adapt to the situation. I mean, that was always the intention, was the last verse, the last version of it, but it was coming in these phases to adapt to the situation that it was in, and to kind of walk the kuffar and the Muslims through the process. What do you think of that?
Yes, it is weird that God has to pretend to be nice and to say nice things, and then he says the real things. For me, it's impossible.
And we're not even sure if he meant this verse abrogates this one, or the be nice and not be nice, because people disagree, right? Because it's not clear that this one replaces that verse. Depends on what kind of Muslim you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When did you have
Sorry.
that realization in your? Did you start from a point of belief, or
Sorry.
are you still there? We may have lost Soleil, and if we have, then we're just gonna move to the next caller, and then we'll come back to Soleil. Give it a couple more seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay. We will come back to you, Soleil. No worries. I'll read a couple of comments and then I'll go to the either Soleil or the next caller. Okay. So there's this comment by Period. It says, Apostate Aladdin, I think as a Muslim, it's best to believe in a point, avoid the potentiality of hell. And calisthenics Wade says that's called Pascal's wager. So here's what I think about that. For a lot of people, it's not like, is it really a choice to best to believe or not? If you realize the truth about something or you realize that something isn't true, can you force yourself to pretend to believe just in case so you don't go to hell? And is that what God wants? And that, brings up a bigger point. Why is God always threatening with torture? Does he want respect? Does he want admiration? Does he want obedience? Or is it all of the above? Because he can't get all of the above at the same time from all people. So I personally, for example, in the context of personal relationships, I cannot respect someone who threatens me all the time. I might respect their authority that they have gained because of whatever position they're in or because they're threatening me all the time. But that doesn't equate to respect or admiration or anything. If anything, inside me, I despise and disrespect them. And not because I'm a hateful person, but because what else do you expect from, threats of torture towards me for no apparent good reason? So it's not really about might as well believe. And as calisthenics said, this is Pascal's wager. A lot of different people have talked about this already, how, which God are you talking about? You only want to stick with yours because it's a safe bet, because that's what you grew up with. But why not consider all the other ones? And there's a lot more to be said about that, but I just wanted to bring up those points. And I absolutely refuse this mentality that Islam is perfect, Muslims are not, because we keep talking about the imperfections in Islam that eventually lead a lot of people to confusion or to adopt different varying beliefs or not adhering to it properly because it's impossible to adhere to properly. And it's the fault of the author who would come up with a book and a religion that is impossible to adhere to properly because his creation is imperfect the way that he created it. And then we scapegoat the creation. It's usually just a cop out. And also I'm kind of bored of Muslims always quoting whatever Westerner or white person agrees with them. It just becomes the poster child for this scientist or this scholar or this philosopher said something we agree with, therefore he's going to be an authority from now on. And this is not an attack against you, period, or anything. I'm just saying this sentiment I see repeated a lot. So yeah, I don't know if Soleil can join anymore, but I will take the next caller. And okay. Next caller should be, one second, should be Islam Gave Women Rights. Islam Gave Women Rights. Oh, so Layla's here. Okay. I'm adding you in 3, 2, 1.
Yes,
Soleil.
sorry. I'm really sorry.
That's
My,
okay.
my father came. He sensed I was doing something haram. He came. I could not speak at all. I'm really
His
sorry.
spidey senses were tingling. Okay.
Oh my God. I'm really sorry. I disturbed the live.
That's okay.
So yeah, and why I don't believe, because of Surah At-Tawbah, Surah 9. It is really violent. Verse 5 and 29. It is a call for war. I always thought that Islam was a religion of peace and love and tolerance of everything. And it was when I read the Surah 9, I was really shocked. It was a lie. It is not a religion of peace for me. And when I debate with Muslims, they said, no, it was only in the past, in the Middle Ages, we had to make war to expand Islam, to make Islam bigger. But in the Quran is not a history book. It is a divine, a sacred book. It is for eternity, you know. So it was a really big, a big problem for me. I could not defend Islam with Surah 9, and I hope everyone reads it. It is really violent, and it abrogates peaceful verses, you know, for me, because it was the last, or when in the last verses that came in a chronology in time. So it abrogates every peaceful verses, and I was really shocked. And I hope everyone reads this chapter 9, and
a lot of Muslims aren't even aware of this, you know, or they either haven't read it in their own language, or haven't even, you know, paused to think about it. And this excuse that it was in the time of war, so it was about that, is kind of enough to get them to stop thinking. And what I have to say to a lot of people are going to say, no, this doesn't abrogate that, or I don't believe in abrogation. Then it brings us back to the flaw of the way that this book is written. Even the verse about abrogation, I don't remember the actual wording of it. Is something about وَمَا كُنَّا something ayatin, whatever. It's not explicitly saying I abrogate verses. Some people understand it as you know, religions, the previous religions are replaced with new ones. Like, there's still room for misunderstanding. So yeah, unfortunately, there is a lot of room for harm, and that's a huge flaw. And I'm glad that you recognize that.
Yeah. And I can read for you, if you want, the verse 5.
Sure.
When the sacred month have passed, then kill the mushrikun.
Right. Yeah.
Kill the mushrikun wherever you find them, and capture them, and besiege them, and prepare for them each and every ambush. But if they repent, etc., etc. And verse 29, which is unbelievable for me: fight against those who believe not in Allah, nor in the last day, nor forbid that which has been forbidden by Allah and His Messenger, and those who acknowledge not the religion of truth. So for me, it's everyone. You know, we must fight everyone until Islam is the only religion in the world.
Yeah. It's unfortunate because it should have like an expiration date. If that's truly was for one specific war, you're supposed to tell us, you know, tell those people which mushrikeen. Right? Is it just you come across any mushrik and you do it? Till when does this expire? You know, this executive decision to fight mushrikeen. You don't leave a war book for 1400 years later where people are not at war, or not everyone is at war. So yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah.
So I don't want to take more time, because there are a lot of people. So thank you so much for what you do, and I will watch the rest of the live or the stream. And thank you.
Thanks for joining, Soleil. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. Okay, I'm going to read a few comments and then I'll get to the next caller. Islam gave women rights. I just want to remind people waiting in the back room, if you've already been on the call, please go watch on the you know, the YouTube link, so that you're not taking up space in the waiting room, so others can join. Hassan Alwan is here. Hey, welcome. He says the verse is قاتلوا الذين لا يؤمنون بالله ولا باليوم الآخر ولا يحرمون ما حرم الله ورسوله ولا يدينون دين الحق. Sorry, the text is very small, but yeah, I'm pretty sure I read that right. That's the verse for those who wanted to see it in Arabic. So I'm going to read a couple of comments that I had bookmarked, and then I'll get to the next caller. Rachel, thanks for being here. Be careful. I thought I read that you're driving or something. Just, you know, focus on the road. She says, this right here, that's the question you posed for me a few months ago that finally brought all the BS to the front and helped me confront it. Thank you. Well, for those who don't know, Rachel and I spoke multiple times on this channel. The videos are posted. She is a convert, or was a convert, and we had a few discussions, and she has since left Islam. She has announced that in one of the live streams. I'm glad that we had that conversation, not because, because the outcome was that she left Islam specifically, but she had a lot of questions and discussions on her mind that she didn't have the space to have up until she came across the channel. So I'm glad that she was able to here. And yeah, I forgot what question that is, but I think it was about disbelievers and empathy. That may be it. But anyway, thanks for being here, Rachel. Next comment. So, period says, I think a lot of what you say is good stuff to try and draw out empathy from Muslims. The problem is many Muslims have become OCD or extremely right or left. Most Muslims act in a very mechanical and robot-like fashion. This is not the essence of the Quran. The real Islam is to be fluid and wisdom-like. I object to this, and here's why. When you say that a lot of Muslims have become OCD, but a lot of Muslims are OCD, a lot of humans are OCD. That's literally something that people are. And Islam doesn't account for that. Islam exacerbates that. Even if you don't have to be diagnosed with OCD or be like all the way down the spectrum, some people have tendencies like that. Some people, it's not unreasonable to obsess over a rule book that if you don't follow it correctly, you will go to hell. If anything, to be honest, it baffles me that people aren't spending their day and night trying to figure out what actual Islam is and how to follow it down to the letter to make sure that they don't misunderstand Allah. And I'm not saying I'm hoping that more people follow the violent verses. I'm saying it's not surprising to me when I see people so paranoid about hell that is always being reminded of in the Quran, that they are trying desperately to make sense of the Quran in ways that you disagree with. So I disagree with this notion that the Quran at its core says to be fluid and wisdom. Like, the reality of it is the author didn't do a good enough job if that was their intention, because good, honest people, well-intending people end up with the so-called wrong conclusions, which I don't think are, I don't even know what the original intentions are, but anyhow, that's my answer to that. By the way, there's a lot of people trying to join in the back room. If you just joined, I will list the order of the people who are here. Unfortunately, the room is full, but keep trying. Maybe there will be room in a little bit. Okay, let me get to a couple more comments, and then the next caller, Islam Gave Women Rights. Sorry to keep you waiting. So a couple of people, just a couple of people are saying that they wish they could join, but they can't, or they would rather use a voice changer. I'm sorry that you can't join, but I'm glad that you're here in the comments, and you can still chat with others in the comments as well. All right, Islam Gave Women Rights. I'm gonna add you in 3, 2, 1. Hey, how are you doing?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Any echo, something like that?
It's good.
Okay, thank you. Hello. I don't know. You want me to tell
Yes,
you
please
my
tell
story
us
with Islam?
however much you're comfortable with about your backstory.
I live in the West, let's say, and my girlfriend, she is Muslim, and it was, how dating is in the Muslim society. Let's say it's very weird.
Depends on which society, but in general, it is very.
I mean,
Yeah.
in general, it's not allowed from what I understand. Even in the thing, you only marriage is allowed. But anyway, let's say she's a bit more progressive, a lot more progressive, and she still felt a bit weird about it. So she asked me to convert, and I didn't know anything about Islam. I'm gonna be honest. I didn't know. I didn't even know if it was a monotheistic religion. I didn't know if it was if they were worshiping Muhammad. I didn't know who he was, what he did. All I knew that was like an Arabic religion, and that they don't eat pork, and they have to go to Mecca once in their life. And so I did convert. It's not that I believed in it that much. I did it to make her feel better. I don't know if that makes sense. But everything that I knew about it, she told me, and she told me that it's a religion of peace. You're not allowed to kill anyone. You're not allowed to steal. You're not allowed to what else? Women are equal to men. things like that. She's what you would call a Muslim feminist, but from the Western definition.
Hmm.
And so I converted, and one day I was like, I want to learn about the religion. She told me, that we believe in the one God. We believe that Muhammad was the messenger, the final messenger. We believe in the Jewish prophets and the Jesus and everything like that. I was like, okay, and I did it to make her feel better. And I was like, in the very early stages, I was reading about Muhammad. So what I did was, I went to the Wikipedia page to read about Muhammad,
Right.
and it said that there was I think a part in the Wikipedia page that said controversies or something like that, criticism, I don't know.
Hmm.
And it said basically nothing. It said that some Muslims killed someone. And then it said at the bottom, it used like 5 words and said something like he married a 6-year-old girl. And at that point, I was like, what? It was like,
It's just a little aside, like just at the end. Oh,
yeah,
by the way, yeah,
it
yeah.
just, I flew back like 10 meters.
Hmm.
And it also said that like the source is Sahih Bukhari. And I didn't know what that was.
Right.
So I asked her,
And
she
you
was
had
like,
converted at that point, right?
yes, yes.
And
I
how is
asked,
that? What did that look like? You just said the shahada at a mosque or something?
yes. No, not at the mosque. She told me just say that, I don't speak Arabic. She told me, say these words. It means I believe in the one God and Muhammad is God's messenger.
Hmm.
I didn't go at the mosque.
Okay.
So I don't, I don't know when it was the last time she went at the mosque. She doesn't even pray. But that's a different issue. She prays, but not daily, not anything like that. But
Mhm.
anyway, that's besides the point. I started doing my own research. At first I was like, what is Sahih Bukhari? What is this? Is this something that you know um, makes sense? Is it something that is relevant? Is it an authentic source? Let's say, because he told me, no. This is just what the Islamophobes say. It's not real. Aisha, she was an adult, and I left it at that because I never wanted anyone to have an existential crisis. I don't want to challenge people's beliefs. But at that point, it's obvious I regret what I did. We're good now. But I started doing my own research, and every time that I was opening a new page, it was getting worse and worse, and it came crashing down really fast, like unbelievably fast. And I think the thing I regret the most is I didn't want to go on YouTube and search, something like I didn't want to find people like Apostate Prophet and David Wood who talk against Islam because it's obvious that there would be bias. And I didn't want to go to an Islamic channel because there's also bias there. So I would do my own research, which is a huge mistake because the bias is even bigger there if you search on Google. Because that's what I was doing. I was searching like,
I would say in
okay,
English sources, yes. In Arabic, it's almost the opposite. But in English sources, yeah.
all right,
I'm guessing
and
you were looking it up in English or another language.
in English,
Yeah.
and it was a real roller coaster because the more I was looking into it, the worse it was getting. I didn't. I'm gonna be honest with you. I wanted it to be true. I wanted to believe in something. It's really difficult. That's where it's really difficult for me at least. It's really easy to say yes, God exists. He cares about us. We have this purpose and this and that. It's really difficult to confront morality and say, we're humans and we don't know. There are things that we don't know and maybe we'll never find out.
Mhm.
And I think what made me leave Islam for was a Muslim for like a very short period of time. In my mind, it counts. But I think morality is something like I give that to the Muslim apologists. Morality can be subjective, but what really sealed it for me was like the scientific mistakes in the Quran. When you look at it as a whole, when you take a step back, and you see a book which describes the earth as a carpet, and the sun is moving around the earth, and it's God who sends down the rain and the thunders. That's Greek mythology, basically. It's nothing out of the ordinary.
Well, let me ask you something again as a devil's advocate. The response to that would be, well, it's all metaphorical. Well, it was, that it's not actually literal. What did you think about that?
I mean, there are. If that is metaphorical, what is the purpose of sending something that is metaphorical? They say, oh, the Quran says that Allah has two hands, and they say it's metaphorical. Allah has a throne. It's not a real throne.
I'm not
It's
sure if that's the Quran or the Hadith. It might be Hadith about the two hands. I think it's a Hadith.
It's a hadith.
I believe so. Somebody correct me in the chat. I don't remember every single verse. But
I remember I was seeing it. I saw it like early on. But Allah has a throne. Allah has I don't know what else, a face. I don't remember. But there are a lot of things that Allah in the Quran. Anyway, but there's no purpose in sending something that is metaphorical other than to cause even more confusion. If that is metaphorical, is fasting metaphorical? Is heaven and hell metaphorical? That's like the lowest answer you could give. It's metaphorical.
Mhm.
If you as a Muslim admit that something in the Quran is metaphorical, you can just throw the entire book out of the window and say that everything's metaphorical.
I mean, metaphors can be useful as a linguistic tool, but the problem with metaphors is that they're not precise, right? There's a lot of there's a lot of wiggle room, and when it's not clear whether the author is trying to make it a metaphor or a literal guide, then that's where the issue arises. So that's far from perfection, right? Like, what did you think when people said the Quran was perfect?
I don't speak Arabic, and
Right.
to me, a book, it's so subjective. I never. I said that's something that people say to themselves to strengthen their faith. What is a perfect book? I don't understand. I tried to read the Quran, the English translation. I felt like I was reading and I wasn't getting any information. I've read some of the Old Testament. I mean, the Old Testament is a giant book. I've read the New Testament. It gives you these books. They give you a story. There is a beginning, especially in the Old Testament. Even though the Old Testament is even more violent than the Quran, if you exclude afterlife, because it doesn't have hell and things like that. In the human world, they say the Old Testament is more violent, but it's a really interesting book to read as a fantasy, because it gives you stories. It gives you the beginning all the way to the end. And I think every atheist, if you communicated with atheists who have read the Old Testament, they all say that it's a phenomenal book for entertainment. No one has ever said that for the Quran. It says nothing. It keeps repeating the same things. You read about God all the time. And that's another thing that I never understood about theists, let's say, which is something you can say, what happened to your conversion? I put it to the side. I saw something that I wanted to believe, so I was like, okay, put this to the side. In their effort to make sense of God, they turned him into the biggest like egotistical dick ever. He keeps telling you about how merciful he is. He keeps telling you how powerful he is. He keeps telling you how he can do to you whatever he wants. Like that's something the most insecure person would ever say. Like a king who who just wants to remind people who's in charge.
He's
That
lashing
doesn't.
out. Like he's like, how dare you? He's having an angry reaction almost.
So yeah, to me, it was the scientific mistakes. Let's say
Mhm.
it's not even any one scientific mistake that made me say, okay, yeah, that's a fairy tale. It's everything as a whole. Take all of these scientific mistakes and put them down. What do you see? You see human ignorance. And the channel that really made me realize that, to this day, I believe my favorite like ex-Muslim channel to this day. I'll say you're the second, my second favorite.
I'll take that.
My favorite is this guy. He's called the Masked Arab. I don't know if you've
Hmm.
heard of him. Yeah, I mean, his stuff was phenomenal. Hassan Radwan as well, but Hassan like never went in such detail. For example, the Masked Arab, he has like a 20-minute video on the Earth, the flat Earth in the Quran, who's carried by the whale. He leaves no stone unturned.
Hmm.
It's just a 20-minute beat down on the Quran and Hadith and everything.
Yeah, I really like his channel. And something I want to note, not because Hassan Odwan is in the chat right now, but just in general, I would say this. I like different approaches. So what the Masked Arab was doing, that deep dive, I really appreciated that. And what I appreciated about Hassan Odwan's method was there was something more human and trustworthy, right? Like you're listening to um, an this kind of almost personal connection, that you would have with a member of your community. You can see that he's a real person, and this is not a point against the Masked Arab at all. Obviously, he had to remain anonymous, and he was going more into the facts, and Hassan Udwan did also go into a lot of the facts. But I like the approach that it got Muslims to get their guard down a little bit, or even potential ex-Muslims or ex-Muslims. So yeah, I know you weren't putting down one person or another, but I do agree. The Masked Arab is really, really good.
I mean, I see from the things I've seen in your channel, you're not really interested in the scientific mistakes of the Quran. You're more interested in like giving comfort to the people who have left Islam and are feeling kind of weird about it.
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's so much that I haven't gotten to. Like, you have no idea the amount of video ideas that I have. Um, but
That's
like, for
good.
example, I talked about it's not exactly scientific. There's a lot more without delving into the science that you can see the absurdity of, an argument that God was making for himself and so on. But a lot of it also has to do with people don't join Islam for scientific reasons. People don't join because of facts. And when they leave, they're shamed for leaving, without making a dissertation about it. I'm trying to remind them that you don't need to, have a dissertation on all of Islam to notice the very absurd things in it. So, yeah. But eventually I'm going to get to some of this stuff as well, every now and then. Yeah.
We'd love to see that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Thank you very much for sharing your story today.
Thank you for taking me in the call. Thank you.
Of course. Take care, and talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. A couple of comments that I had bookmarked, and then I'll also mention a couple of things that I forgot to talk about right now. Khaliforn, okay, interesting name. I left because I was done finding excuses for Allah and defending him such a brat. Very valid stance, to be honest. And she also mentioned, so this is about the imprecise language. وَقَالَتِ الْيَهُودُ يَدُ اللَّهِ مَغْلُولَةٌ. So some among the Jews said Allah's hands are closed. Okay. No, I was thinking of a different verse. Never mind. No comment on this at the moment, but it is a mention of God's hand, but still no comment at the moment. Thank you, Happy Camper, for the super chat. Yes, that is the hadith about God's both right hands, because God is superstitious, and left is bad, and black is bad, and white is good. It's very primitive, superstitious stuff. A couple of things that came to mind as I was talking to the previous caller. It's funny because I know that some Muslims would say, well, he was never really a real Muslim to begin with, so he's a fake ex-Muslim, whatever. But the moment that he says the Shahada, the moment that he embraces Islam, he becomes a real Muslim. But the moment that you leave, there's scrutiny there, there's qualifiers. And when we were talking about the perfect book, what makes a perfect book? An example came to mind. People always say, or there are a lot of people who make jokes about IKEA furniture being hard to assemble and the IKEA guides are not being unclear. I never really understood that because most of the time I had no issues with them. Right? They seemed fine enough without any words. So that's very subjective, right? Yeah, I think they're good. Other people think they could be better or they're really bad, and we haven't arrived at whether it's perfect or not. But the worst that can happen is you will end up breaking a part of the furniture, or ruining a screw or something, or having to redo part of it. You're not going to accidentally think something completely different from the intended purpose, which is, go harm someone or do this or that. So the author of the Quran could have done a lot better to be more precise, so that it's not even feasible to arrive at such a wild conclusion if it is misunderstood. Anyhow, taking the next caller in a second. I believe the next caller is R. R, I'm adding you in 3, 2, 1. Hey R, how's it going?
Hello. Great. How are you?
I am good. Thank you for asking.
Okay. Well, sorry, I'm a little nervous. I've never called in before.
That's all right.
But why I left Islam was because, well, it was like a series of events, really. But the first time that I decided, oh, I don't really believe in that, is just because I questioned hell, because I grew up, in America with people with all different religions. So I was just like, yeah, that doesn't really make sense. Why am I the only one not going there? It just didn't make sense as a child. And there was this point though that I got really into Islam when I was in middle school. I was 12 or 13. And I would go to all the girls' lectures at the masjid and all the camping trips. I was really involved. And they were all hijabis, and they were all a little older than me too. So I was influenced by them a lot. In their halakas, they would say oh, hijab is mandatory. This proves it. And they all wore hijab, and they talked about how this was my Quran teacher. So at the same time, I'm going to school at the masjid to learn, memorize the whole Quran. So my teacher is also oh, you get your sins counted after puberty. Once you hit puberty, your sins start to count. And you have to wear hijab after puberty. So I'm at that age, so literally I got my period in the middle of the school year at an American school with no other Muslim people. And I just showed up on a Tuesday with my hijab on because I was oh, my sins are starting to count. I have to cover myself now. And it was just weird. It was weird thinking back, what, I didn't even know what that meant, and what I thought about it was oh, your good deeds and bad deeds are measured on a scale, so I was okay, if that's a sin, then that's a sin every single day that I don't wear it, or this psychosis about life, man. You're just oh yeah, I'm gonna get punished if I do this, you live your life with these things in the back of your head, so you don't actually get to be involved with life, And so that decision was my own. I did choose, but the alternative was
That decision meaning to
eternal
wear the
fire.
hijab, right?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the hijab. It was my choice to put it on, and I did put it on at that age. And then I was getting older and out of that group. Those girls went to college. They were way older than me. I was in middle school, so I went to high school got less involved with them. And then just like started to question hell, you know? Like that kind of happened at that time period. I was just like, all my friends aren't Muslim, but they're cool. I don't want to see them go to hell. Like, you know, so what happened was that I asked the sheikh at the masjid why we have hell, like why it makes sense that a Rahman, a Rahim would do that, you know? Like it didn't make sense to me. I was like, yeah, this doesn't add up, you know? And he said some dumb thing like, "Oh, what about if you're raping and killing people? Don't you want those people to go?"
Freaking hell. I knew where that was going from the first moment you said that you asked the sheikh. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and then he also said like, and then what? You'll just do whatever you want if you don't have a punishment. I was like, okay, that literally doesn't make sense. And I was actually just thinking about that earlier today, like that reward and punishment is like such a primal thing. Like every animal, like every living creature is like about their survival. They want food, they want sex, they want sleep, you know, and they don't want danger. They don't want fire. My cat runs away from candles, like, you know, they don't want that. It's a primal thing. So to to think that, you know, like we're actually telling people like, okay, you'll have virgins to do it with and fruits and comfort, so do this. And if you don't do it, then you know you'll have hell forever. Like it's just the most simple primal thing. Like it's like a cat following a trail of food, you know? Like it's just so dumb. It's like, am I a dog, dude? Like I do not even get how that makes sense, you know? But anyway.
Well,
Then
I've had a couple of
um,
thoughts as you were talking. I want to pick your brain about that. So I'll start with a lighthearted one. Why did you laugh the moment that you said I went to ask a sheikh before you even said that?
it was just a funny situation, man. Like he was just like in the girls area to talk to the girls, but he was acting so weird, like not looking at us. And it was like, do you think you're gonna get a hard on if you look at us? Like, what the heck, man? Like, it's such a weird sexual environment, like how they separate them like that, you know? And yeah, he was just acting weird. Like, it was a weird situation. That's why I left.
Okay, I'm glad I asked then. um, yeah, one of my own sheikhs who was teaching me Quran. He was a very nice guy, but he wouldn't like look my mother who wore a hijab, who dressed even more like in a jalabiya kind of dress when the sheikh was coming over, and that's only for necessary conversations, right? He wouldn't look her in the eye. He wouldn't look in her direction at all. And it's sad that people saw that kind of thing as a virtue. Like, look at how well mannered this person is, but it's dehumanizing in a way. I mean, that's how I feel about it. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I would completely agree, dude. Especially like when you're young, dude. Like I was not allowed to wear shorts in elementary school. I grew up in Texas. It's hot here, man. Like I would roll up my pants to be shorts like at recess and stuff. And like I would like my mom saw me one time at recess and she got so mad at me. And it's like, I'm just a kid and I don't get what's so bad about knees, you know? Like, I just don't get it. It's like you're sexualized from like the get go. That's like a whole conversation, man. Like, that
Yep.
whole idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I can rant about that for a bit, but I won't. Uh,
Yeah.
couple of
But
things
that
that
wasn't the
Mhm.
only thing. Cause like I went through a crisis. Cause like after that happened, like, I was like, okay, hell doesn't make sense, whatever. But like, I, you know, was a high schooler. Like, I started smoking weed. I had like a relationship with a guy, like, you know, but I had a hijab. It was so funny. But then I like started doing other drugs and like it was starting to get kind of bad, you know, like by the end of
Mhm.
high school. and I was like, I'm having a crisis. Like, I need guidance, you know? So I went to the Quran, not initially. So actually, I got into meditation, like just mindfulness meditation, and that started to help me. And the guy who like led the app was a Buddhist monk. So I like got a book on Buddhism, and the monk in it said you can actually practice Buddhism with your tradition. He actually encouraged you should do your tradition, you know? And so I was like, okay. So I went to the Quran, and, you know, I'm like in this crisis. I'm like going through drugs. I'm like living this double life, you know, with like a hijab and like, you know, at the same time, I have a whole relationship I'm hiding from my parents. And it was just weird, you know, to live that lie. And so I just like, I like started meditating and like separating myself from those narratives, and I ended up actually confessing to my parents and everything. But like also, you know, once I read the Quran for that guidance, I was like actually reading it like, oh, this is the word of God, you know, like I was really involved. And then I read the verses about the women's divorce rights. And I was like, I had grown up watching like domestic abuse, like my mother be abused by my father. And she actually did not leave because her mom told her not to, on some cultural stuff, you know, I guess. But
I'm sorry to hear that.
yeah,
It's
thank
it's
you.
it's not just culture. Let me tell you that. Like it's even if it is culture, I see it being encouraged, if not incepted by Islam. The idea that it's better to reconcile, right, than to separate, because God doesn't like divorce. So only do it if you gotta. So I'm sorry that your mother felt pressure to stay in that situation.
Thank you. Yeah, it really does suck. And, you know, when I saw that it was ruled by God, I was just like, okay, like already, you know, hell didn't make sense to me this whole time. So then like once I read that, I'm like, okay, this is bullshit, you know. I just like sorry, I didn't know if I could say that on here. But,
That's okay.
you know, I just like then just went on with my life, and I was still doing drugs at this point actually. And like I just continued meditating, and actually it's interesting because like I don't attribute the meditation to like a path or something. Like I just feel like it was mindfulness. It was just awareness, you know what I'm saying? So like I just like would part of the meditation was doing this body scan. So it was like, you know, you scan your body from head to toe. And I like still believed in God or whatever. So I would say like thank you for each part of my body. That was like my own thing I added to it, you know? And I was like just talking to my friend about it. And my friend was like, dude, you're always like doing drugs, but then you're like thankful for your body. And it was just like a little comment, but I like really reflected on it. And like, you know, I would like really sit in gratitude. Like my whole system is functioning. Like my heart is pumping. Like this is so great. You know, like if I do put something in here, like it does mess up the function. Like just my own intellect. You know what I'm saying? It was like my own awareness of like, okay, yeah, this is like a system. I should, you know, make sure it functions well. Like, you know, it's just
Mhm.
that awareness. It wasn't like no ruling in Islam could give me the morality that my own intellect gave me, or like, you know, the right action. I feel like my actions coming from my own awareness is like actual morality, not like a set of rules, you know, type thing.
So you mean after you were more in touch or in tune with yourself, that's when you started realizing this, what you believe is a better morality than Islam's set of rules for morality, right?
Well, no, that's not what I'm trying to say. I guess what
Okay.
I'm trying to say is morality can only come from your own, like, maybe I shouldn't even use the word morality, but you know, it would have to be your own like awareness, like your own awareness of action and consequence, you know, your own awareness of how your action would affect others, your own awareness of how your action would affect yourself. Like, just your awareness, not like being in tune with anything. It's just being with life, I guess that's the thing. Like, nature isn't rigid. Like, you know, we get a set of rules with the Quran. We get like a guideline, an outline on how to look at reality. But like, reality is what it is. It doesn't matter what we say about it, you know? Like, yeah, that's basically it, Like, it's just like life is life, regardless if there's a law in the sky or if not, Like, I'm like, why are we even in that conversation of like, I'm an atheist, Because it's like, God was made up in the first place. Like, if we just live in reality, like, that's not even a conversation. You feel what I'm saying? Like, you're just
I share that sentiment, to be honest. Unfortunately, the way that things are, we have to have this conversation right now. But the reality of it is, like, reality is what we observe. There might be things that we're not able to observe yet, but the amount of speculation that we have to pretend is valid and then start from there is absurd, to be honest. But it's just the way that things are, and we have to start somewhere. But hopefully, eventually, there won't be a need for these kind of labels. Like, people who want to label themselves religious, that would be kind of the exception. Like, that's the odd thing, not that you have to justify why you don't believe in their stories and you have to hide that from them and so on. So hopefully someday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for real. Because there's this whole disentangling process because they've like built up all these notions. But like, if they could just distance themselves from those preconceived notions, then they could actually experience life. You know what I'm saying? It's like that becomes the goggles they're wearing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for the opportunity to speak. Sorry if I took too long.
That's okay. Thank you for joining us today.
All right. Goodbye.
Take care, R. Bye-bye. All right. Getting to a couple of comments, and then I'm taking the next caller, which is Desi Neo. Long time no talk. All right. So Hassan Al-Ron saying many believers confuse reasons why belief can be beneficial with reasons why it's true. I agree. That's when somebody says, wouldn't it suck if someone who's a criminal wouldn't get any justice, served to them? Yeah, that would suck. But does that mean that it's necessarily going to happen? Just because we wish it would happen doesn't mean, therefore, there must be a rule to make it happen. Because that presupposes that the world is fair. There is a mechanism to make it fair. And even then, we don't know that is this specific mechanism, like the mechanism behind justice. There are a lot of people who are harmed, but because they're not believers, they're not getting their justice in the afterlife. And is revenge really justice? If the person who harmed somebody else gets tortured, does that undo the first action? Does that make the person who got harmed feel better? Is the magnitude of the torture, does it relate to the magnitude of the crime? It's different for every person. So yeah, just because belief is comforting or there's a reason why it can be beneficial for somebody or another doesn't mean that that's a reason it is true. That's just an advantage of having it, which for some people is not even a choice to have or not. Okay, reading a couple of comments. So Danny was asking something. Okay, Danny was saying, if you're a child, then you gotta listen to what your parents tell you to wear. I don't disagree with that. This was in the context of the hijab, and I absolutely disagree with that. So this is not me saying this is what parents should not do. Talking about the hijab, when you teach your children or you expose them to situations or religions or people who teach them that if you don't cover yourself this way, if you don't understand that you are different and there's shame in you showing your hair. I'm not even saying about showing anything sexual, just your hair, making that such a shameful thing to show and saying you're going to be tortured otherwise. That's child abuse, in my opinion. So it's not as simple as, oh, your parents told you to wear it. Well, they're your parents. I disagree with that. And divorce is allowed in Islam. It's more frowned upon in Christianity. I never said divorce wasn't allowed. And I said God doesn't like divorce. God likes of people. And I don't remember where I'm quoting that from, so please correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, but it is a very, very common sentiment. I'll even give you an example from my recent videos. Go watch my recent videos about Prophet Muhammad and his morality. In a situation where a woman is afraid her husband is going to leave her because she's getting too old or ugly, or he's not interested in her anymore, and he is her source of income, right? Because that's Islam gave women rights, which is he has to provide for her. And in that situation, if he leaves her, she's kind of screwed. And society frowns upon or looks down on women who are left. They're not as easily going to get married again because obviously the dating pool or marriage pool is smaller as well. Anyway, long story short, she can give up some of that money. She can give up some of her rights for him to allow her to remain his wife. And that's Islamically recommended almost. It's allowed. And the problem with that is the wording of it even says because sulh, because getting along is better, because making compromises. But what the hell is the guy doing? Like, what compromises is he giving? So no, this is not just that Islam allows divorce. Islam frowns upon a lot of these, even these outlets like divorce. And a woman can't ask for a divorce. A woman can't just be like, hey, I want a divorce, and then it happens. She can ask. She can make a case for herself. She can say, because he beats me too harshly and leaves a mark. But if he beats her just the right amount, she still has no case. And I'm going to talk about something like that in one of the next episodes. So check out my series this Ramadan. I'm working really hard on a lot of videos this Ramadan. Anyway, now I'm getting to the next caller. The next caller is, let's see. Yeah, Desi Neo. I'm adding you in 3, 2, 1. Hey, how are you?
Hey, Apostate, how you doing?
I am good. How are you?
Oh man, just well, I was waiting all the time outside, and then finally I got on the back of the bus, and then now I got on. So if there's any noise in the background, I apologize. Okay.
That's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Before I say anything, I just want to see that Hassan Radwan is over there, and since Hassan Radwan is there, I have never formally spoken to him, so this is a good opportunity for me to just give my regards to him. I really appreciate all the work he has done, and all his content is literally one of the main reasons why I went through the change and the paradigm shift that I had. His videos were like paramount in my understanding, and going through that period of time, his videos basically guided me through, because I'm not like a young guy. I'm like around 40, 45 actually. So I related with him way more. Same with Master Arab and all those people that I listen to and all that. But really appreciate Hassan Adwan's content, and hats off to his work. So I just wanted to say that first off.
Well, Hassan is here. He says thank you for that.
Oh, okay, great.
And I want to thank both of you, because there's a need for more mature vocal ex-Muslims, because people tend to dismiss people like myself by saying, you're too young. What do you even know? Like, you haven't even lived life. So it's good to show that even people who have lived a long time as a Muslim do come to the same realizations eventually, right?
Yes. So I mean, today's stream, I'm gonna try to keep it very short, so I don't want to take up too much time. You said 10 minutes, so I'll try to keep it less. But I'm just gonna just pigtail on what you basically said about instruction. You know how like Quran is supposed to be the guidebook, the instruction, right? My background is in aviation. Like I'm technical writer. I write technical manuals for aircrafts and military aircrafts. So the way I look at it, in a very simple way, if I try to put an analogy together, a pilot's manual is there, and it has to be concise and precise. When he's in flying the plane and something happens or whatever he wants to know, it needs to tell you exactly what to do. Imagine if the pilot's manual was like the Quran, saying some of the verses are mustahakim and some of the verses are ambiguous.
Only the good pilots would know.
I mean, like, and the real meaning of the manual, only the person who wrote the manual knows. Nobody else knows the real meanings of these buttons. I mean, can you imagine what would happen to that pilot's airplane and all the other pilots that are flying based on that same manual?
Yeah,
They'll be
and
flying
let me
all over the
confirm
place.
something. When you're writing these manuals, you're writing for the lowest common denominator, right? Like
Oh
you're trying
yeah,
to make it so clear so that even obviously I'm not saying pilots are dumb, but even the dumbest among them or the least skilled or the least informed would still be able to follow, right?
exactly. And at the same time, it has to be specific. It can't be like press the red button. Which red button? The one on the left, the one on the right, the one on the top, on the bottom.
Which model
Yeah,
plane,
exactly.
which
So
year?
many things play. So, just as an analogy, very simple analogy. If flying a plane, the book has to be so accurate. Imagine the consequences of plane crashing. Only a few people dying, 100 or 200 people. But this book, if you misinterpret it, the whole civilization, the whole millions of people could go to hell just because of a wrong interpretation. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to say that some of the verses are just ambiguous and you could just and the gaslighting is the worst. If you have evil in your heart, you will look at the ambiguous words. How much of a gaslighting is that? Like, first you'd say the verses are ambiguous, and then right on top of it you say, oh, big, and the people who have bad intentions in your heart will look at the ambiguous verses. So you can't even look at the ambiguous verses in a bad way. You have to look at them in a positive. Is so many things, but I digress. I'll go back to exactly why um, I left. I mean, I had questioned my biggest thing that kept me in the religion for so long. Since I told you my background is technical. Thing, the things that didn't make sense to me in the Quran are the things that they tell you that are true that doesn't make any sense. Like Noah's Ark, animals sitting in the ark. Joe, what is that? Yunus al Islam going into the fish belly, things like that. Moses splitting the sea. I mean, those things. I can understand the other books. They say they are inspired, they're metaphorical. You can take it as a story, you can take it as a thing. You don't have to folklore, whatever. But in Quran, the problem is it says no, no, no. To be a Muslim, you have to actually believe these things happen. And if you don't believe them, you're saying the Quran is lying.
So,
And
so you
that
weren't able to have one of those because some Muslims somehow are convinced that this is metaphorical, and yeah, even the story of all this stuff is metaphorical. You're saying you saw enough in the Quran to convince you that it's kufr to take it as metaphorical, right?
Exactly. And at the same time, depending on I'm a Sunni Muslim, like, Hanafi, Sunni Muslim. So obviously, you have to believe them as true. You cannot, if I was a Sufi or somebody and just taking it as a like, oh, maybe it means something else. No, as a Sunni Muslim, you don't have a choice. If you don't believe it, you're not a Muslim. It's like cut and dry. If you don't believe these stories actually happen, if you don't believe Noah's story, and if you don't believe Adam was made by God, by mud collected from all these other stories, you don't believe them as actual facts, you're not a Muslim in a Sunni Islam, Salafi sort. But I mean, those sort of things really bother. It's funny, I'm actually going full circle, like, just like the whole 4 stages of grief. When you lose your religion, you get like, first you're so surprised when you hear all this stuff, and then you get very angry. And I went through the anger phase. I was like belligerent with people, fighting with everybody, going to sheikhs, spending 4 hours debate, talking to them, explain to me, no, but this doesn't make, I went through the whole phase. Then I went through the depression phase, like, just everything fell apart. Like my whole thing, like what was the meaning of all this and all that stuff. And then finally, now it's more reconciliation. Now I'm more calm. Like now I understand. Now I studied more philosophy, studied more. And the thing that really helped me was studying all the other religions and the origins of religion. That really, I mean, if any advice I tell any Muslim to do, you cannot critique Islam unless you step away from Islam. You cannot be inside Islam and then try to critique it, because it would, in order to see the reality of this thing, step away from it. Look at Islam from 10,000 feet, and then look at the other religions. Look at how other religions were developed and the flaws in the other religion. And then, with a neutral eye, just look at Islam and be honest to yourself. Is it any difference? It is developed exactly the same. I do agree, certain philosophies, certain thoughts, certain things are better in Islam, structure wise. Okay, I give you that. But it is still flawed just like the other religion, and it shows the hallmark of human development right there in the religion.
I
But
think we shouldn't be comparing. I mean, no, we should be comparing. Sorry, but when they compare and they find Islam is better in one way, like for example, when you mention anything aside from the Abrahamic religions, they say, "How can there be more than one God? Polytheism doesn't make sense," and that just shuts down their brain. They're not going to inspect anything else except monotheism makes sense. Therefore, I'm not going to look at anything else. So I urge them to, like you said, pause and okay, despite Islam being better in this or that or making more sense in 1 or 2 points, look at the rest too. Don't stop there.
that's true. And unlike, I mean, I know I'm from Pakistan background, so I have you know me, I have a YouTube channel. I do more work in my native language, which is Urdu. I make a lot of videos on it, and
Oh,
I
check his
actually
channel,
want
by
to.
the way.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
want you to come to my channel. I want to do a full interview with you. I've asked you that before, but I know you're super busy. But one of
Sorry, I
these days,
forget a
when
lot. So yeah,
yeah,
please email me and we'll arrange something
yeah,
for
no,
sure.
definitely, I want to do an interview with you. And I mean, all I say is like, you know what, cognitive dissidence. Just look at it, Islam, not a as one of the atheists I heard, you have to look at it, Islam with a dead heart. Just don't have any feeling for Islam. And just look at it as a
But that's
religion.
kufr. That's kufr right away. That's the defense mechanism in Islam, right? Once you put down your guard, right? It's over for you. But that's the problem. How do you as a Muslim look at it objectively, or even just for a second pausing your belief, right? And looking at it as a non-believer. I'm not even going to say disbeliever. You can't. For a lot of people, you can't, because then you're a kafir.
I think the biggest thing that kept me in Islam was the fear of hell. I think from the childhood, the indoctrination of hell. I mean, Pakistan from childhood, from the age of five and six, you read all these torture in hell and the torture you're gonna get in the grave. Especially when you're in the grave, you get all you know the stories of like the snakes and the scorpions coming in and all that other stuff, and then in hellfire, what are the tortures that are waiting for the mushrik? And it never made sense to me, the sense that what is wrong with this? Because you're being tortured for your belief, not for your action. It's because you did not believe. So this guy who's in front of me, he's a Christian or whatever, he's a Hindu or whatever. He's a perfectly normal guy like me and you. But since he didn't believe, he's going to be tortured. And the answer to that, when I ask the sheikhs, the general answer is like, well, wallahu leave it to God. He's the most merciful. That's not a satisfactory answer. Like, just leave it.
Mhm.
Like, how can you just close your eyes to that fact that Quran says that they are going to be tortured because of shirk, and Allah does not forgive shirk. He can forgive anything, but shirk will never be forgiven. So that means literally anybody. I'm talking about Christians, Jews, Hindus, everybody goes
That's
to
people
hell.
who do believe in some version of God
Yeah,
too. Yeah.
doesn't matter if you're Christian, you believe in Trinity, you go to hell
Yeah.
because shirk is basically having somebody along with God. You cannot have anybody along with God. So all of those people. And how could you sit there and think you are the only privileged people that God talked to, and somehow you got the special key? And even if let's say assume you want to go with that, okay, you got the special key. How can you sit there be okay with the rest of the 5 billion people going to hell? I mean, it just does not make any sense. Why people don't even look at it as a more broader sense? Forget about the errors in the Quran. Forget about the and you know what? I don't really care about a lot of the verses in the Quran now, because now I understand there was a book written at that time and killed the mushrikun. Okay, they were having a war with the mushrikun, and this was written at that time to motivate those people and all that stuff. You can
Mm.
actually use apologetics to answer some of those questions. Fine, great, you know, but just logically it doesn't make any sense, that you're this creator of the whole galaxy and the cosmos and the universe somehow is worried about how many wives that the Muhammad will have, and how many stones you need to use, and what foot you need to put in the rest. I mean, so many things, it just doesn't make sense. So I think my time's up is up. I'm gonna take my I just gonna go on a rant or something.
Well, I want to ask you one quick thing before you go.
Sure.
From your experience, you've experienced all the stages of, grief, and you mentioned a depression, and I feel, I guess, like a loss, feeling like you lost either.
Yes, I'm not talking about like clinical depression or I'm just
Yeah,
saying the
no,
sadness, you feel because you lose your community, you lose your family, you lose your support structure. Everything goes away once you leave Islam because now you can't do the things with them the way you were doing it before,
Well, I want to ask about one thing in specific, and if it's uncomfortable, please, feel free to not answer it. But the grief specifically about the amount of time that you've spent in Islam or on Islam specifically, a lot of people spend a lot of time studying it for years and years and years. How did you get over that?
I did not uh, feel the I mean I did feel the grief that why did I not look seriously at this sooner, and all the amount of time and effort that I spent, the 5 daily prayers and the Ramadans and all, and going to lectures. I was one of those people. I'm in America, so I used to be going to ISNA conventions all the time. I used to be going to lectures, weekend lectures, workshops, all of that stuff. My wife is a hijabi, so we were going constantly. Every 2 weeks, we're going to this lecture and that lecture and listening to everybody. So yes, I mean you do feel this loss, but then when I was going through the depression phase, I felt that, what, a lot of people, when they get to the depression phase and they get to the nihilistic phase of the thing, the pressure is so much that they go back to religion because they can't handle it. And I'm glad that, I took that time and I just went straight into studying. Okay, I said, okay, you know what, let's just learn, and that helped me cope. I just went through Richard Dawkins, all the atheist content. I went through philosophical content. I went to the evolution, all the basics of that. Just try to educate myself as much as I can so that I don't fall into the nihilistic phase of it. But yes, anybody saying that leaving a religion is not going to cause you to be depressed is a liar. Yes, it will cause you to be depressed. It will give you nihilistic tendency.
It
But
depends on the person. It is
yes,
likely, yeah, for a lot of people, it is likely to.
and that's the reason that you see a lot of people who like, oh, I was also atheist. Okay, when I was atheist for 2 years, and then now they have this long beard, and now they're compensating for being so sorry that they were atheist for 2 years that they're trying to make up for it by being even more super religious and stuff like that, because they went into the nihilism and they couldn't handle it, and they're like, no, I want the comfort blanket back, and they go back into it. It's like, you know what, life has to have a meaning. How can it not have a meaning? Well, at least a religion is giving me a meaning, so let me go back. And isn't it funny how 95% of the people who leave the religion always end up going to the same religion because they find their same religion as the truth religion,
Yeah, they don't find God elsewhere usually. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, if they
yeah.
return back,
If they return back.
Yeah.
But this is, I mean, very cathartic talking about things like that, and I totally understand people going through these phases. Now that I've been in this for about 5 years, so I'm already past it, and now I actually look at the beauty of it. So I look at some of the things in Islam that are beautiful, like the community part of it, and the getting together, and certain things. So I basically went all full circle, kind of,
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for calling in, and yeah, I'll definitely come talk to you on your channel sometime
Oh
soon.
yeah, I would appreciate that, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'll send you an email or Facebook or something, and I would love to take an interview from you.
Sounds good. I'll talk
All
to you
right,
then.
take care,
care.
buddy.
Bye-bye. All right, got more callers that I will get to very soon. Thanks again, Desi Neo, for joining. A lot of people are happy to see their themselves represented. Urdu speakers, for example, are happy to see an Urdu speaker ex-Muslim. So I'm happy to see that as well. A couple of comments I wanted to get to, like Noshin was saying she would love to see a Bengali ex-Muslim. With time, give it time. Some might be Bengali, they're just not disclosing that they are. So some might be half Bengali. Who knows? Hint, hint. Anyway, so I found this interesting. Link Bumpchu says, I never understood, even when I was a Muslim, that Muslims tend to say he's a good Muslim rather than saying he's a good human, because Christians do that too. That's what's funny. They link goodness with their religion, morality with their religion. So if you're being a good person, I've had Christians say to me, "Wow, it's like Christ is shining through you," or "I can see the Christianity in you," or something, some version of that. Don't quote me verbatim. Um, and Muslims do it too, and that's why I think they're confusing goodness and morality and just good virtuous things with their religion specifically. Um, what's funny is there's another phrase. Not sure if you can hear my cat. He's being very noisy right now. There's another phrase that I've heard a lot, maybe even more than this, which is um, he fears God, like a good person. Oh, he's a good person. He fears God. That I found very disturbing. Anyhow, I will get to the next caller now. Who is the next caller? We've got Russian, Apostate Russian. I'm adding you in 3, 2, 1. Hey, Apostate, how's it going? Are you there? You're muted.
Oh, sorry about that. Hi, thanks. I'm good.
Right.
How about you?
I'm good, thank you.
All right, great. So I'll just get into it. I'm closeted Muslim. I mean, ex-Muslim, and it gets really tiring sometimes to stay in closet, but I have to because of my family, and I just don't want to lose any contact with them and anything like that. So I have to pretend. And another thing is just thank you for giving us the platform to talk, because most of us, or many of us closeted Muslims, there's no way to talk to who you talk to your parents you can't, to your friends you really can't either. So thank you very much. And I have so many issues with Islam now, but I'll give you just a few of them. And if you don't mind me, I have ADHD, so if I we're off, please bring me back to the conversation. But
For sure.
if I may, I'll just go through what I have to say, basically vent just a little bit, and then if you have time, you could ask me some questions.
Sure.
So firstly, again, shout out to all the closeted Muslims that have to pretend to stay Muslim, especially now with Ramadan and everything. I know it is hard, and those who are not ex-Muslims, you don't know how hard it is, really, because you're living double life, and it gets really, really tiresome. And if you have to fast on top of that, and you don't believe that, it really is torturous. When I was a Muslim, I believed it, and it was sort of a spiritual fasting. But once you don't believe it, when you have to fast, it really is torturous. And special shout out to Hassan Ridwan also. He truly helped me in the very beginning of my questioning faith of Islam. So I want to thank Hassan Ridwan for that. So the whole story is, I was a secular Muslim in my hometown. I grew up in a secular society. I'm from former Soviet Union. I'm over 40 now, so you could calculate. I was born actually in Soviet times, and I grew up through it. And then I moved to the US, and I became more observant Muslim. So once I moved to the States, later on, I converted. I got so much into Islam, I converted some of my American friends, believe it or not. And later on, I converted, I almost like quote unquote converted my secular family into becoming more observant Muslims. So now that I left Islam, I hate myself for doing it. Why? Because now I see my nieces, young nieces, that now they have to cover themselves, and I know I really don't know if they really believe in Islam. They're still young, but still, it just, why would you do that to a young child, and especially they're living in the United States? I mean, so I see them cover and do all these chores and everything, and I feel like if I did not convert my family into becoming more religious, I don't think this would have happened, because my family never wore hijab. My mother never wore a hijab before I came into studying Islam and everything. So
Wait, I'm sorry to
yeah.
interrupt you, but just so I don't lose that thought either. I hope you don't blame yourself too much for it, because you have no control over what happened in the past, right? You know that that has happened, and you got to a point right now. I still haven't heard the rest of your story. I don't know what you're doing going forward, but um, you did the what you thought was the best thing in that position, right? You were doing it out of the goodness of your heart, right? You weren't doing it for malicious reasons. So I hope that you can feel less guilty about that and forgive yourself for it if it's still, bothering you at the moment.
It really does bother me. I basically on intellectual level, I might understand what you're saying, and I'm with you.
I
But
know.
on a personal or on an emotional level, it is. I get. Excuse me. I get a little emotional because they're really tough on their kids right now. When we're growing up, I have a sister. They never been this tough on us because it was not to do. It was not to do with Islam before that. Now I see that they're really tough. They have to pray. They have to wake up. They don't have enough sleep, and they have to go to school and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, but again, that's not the main issue with Islam for me now. But it is one of them. I hope one day when they grow up, maybe I could open up to my nieces and just tell them. Maybe they will grow up because of the internet. And I'm getting to my next point that actually internet and all this open information is killing the ideology. Honestly, I think internet is killing Islam and any religion for that matter, because now you have so much. I am not an Arab speaker, right? So when I was growing up, we were nominal Muslims, and I didn't know, I didn't read Quran, and I didn't understand it. I basically learn maybe last chapter just for the prayers and all that kind of stuff, right? But I didn't know I didn't know what I was reading. Or for example, hadith, there were some fake hadith or some weak hadith that prayed or portrayed Prophet Muhammad as being such a good guy that he knocked on his neighbor's door when she was sick, although she was a Jew, who threw some garbage at him or something like that. So there was some weak hadiths that I run, and we believe that. But now that we have all this information, it's killing. And this is what brought me into questioning Islam. When I became more Muslim, and I'm in the United States, right? So when we go to say prayers and everything, for example, in Eid, right? Now I see such a cringe when so many of us would block off the streets, and it is such a burden to Westerners that, now I look at it and it's a burden to me. But this is what I believed then, and I think this is wrong. What I did was wrong, and if any Muslims are listening, guys, it's not really nice. You're living in Western, society. Let's be more respectful of their time, of their streets, of their space.
Well,
But
wait, might I add? I just want to
yeah.
mention something. Well, I do agree with most of that sentiment. I don't think it's because they're Westerners and non-Muslims that we should be or Muslims should be respectful and kind of mindful. It's because there are people, whether they're even Muslims, for example, sometimes they just want to get home. They don't want to stop and pray, or they're not going to stop and pray, or they can't, or whatever. Just be mindful of other people around you. And just like there's a lot of entitlement, though, there's a lot of Muslims expect accommodation for their religion in the Western world, but we know how it is, and like I can attest to how it is in the Muslim world. The whole world grinds to a halt for whatever it is that Islam wants to be done, and I think that shouldn't be the case in either world. I think religion is a personal thing. If people want to get together and have a communal prayer, that's obviously that's good. Just try to be as least disturbing to others, disruptive to others as possible in the West or otherwise. But Yeah, that's sorry
I
to
agree.
interrupt. Yeah.
No, I agree. That's actually what I wanted to basically
Mhm.
come across. So yeah, let's just respect each other, and especially when we move to the West, when we move to the United States or Europe. Now I live in Europe, but I was in the United States for a while. I mean, let's just respect them. And a lot of times, I'm talking about myself and the people that were around me when I was Muslim. We didn't really care much about the West, and especially at this times when we get together, we have to pray. It was all about Islam and how we're doing it for Allah, and Allah is bigger than anything and everyone, and so on and so forth. But anyway, let's just be respectful. But I'm coming to my biggest problem right now. So, although we were nominal Muslim, when we're young, we're still taught by our grandparents, our parents, a little bit of Islam here and there, and we were indoctrinated. And one of the worst things when you're growing up, a kid, is teaching of hellfire, jinns, the shaitan, the the tortures, the questioning in your grave, or when you enter the room, you have to still say salam because there's some, house jinns or whatever, or I don't remember what it was now, but when I was growing up, it was jinns would shift shape into like black cats or black dogs or whatever that might be, and it comes with the specific I think regions. In some places it's a dog, in some places it's a cat or whatever. Because in those countries and those areas, you never like get into real sort of Salafi, the basics of Islam's, but it is a lot of mixture of this, that, and other. So that all left me with a phobia. And I'm a grown up man. I'm over 40. I am scared of dark rooms. I am scared of empty houses. And I have a child. And when my child cries inside the room, I wish he stops so I don't have to enter his room because I'm scared. It's bad. It's bad. I cannot do anything about it. I went to a doctor for it. Here now that I'm in Europe, I went to a doctor. Doctor prescribed me some medications and meditations and so on and so forth. And basically the bottom line is I have to face it. So basically you have to face that fear, I guess, the way they had explained to me. And I'm scared. Even for the sake of my child, I'm still scared. And because I'm afraid, and I understand it does not exist. There's no shaitan, there's no jinns, there's no fear, no fears, nothing. Nothing shapes and everything. And I understand it. But I cannot do anything about it. And I hate it. I don't know who I hate. Do I hate myself? Do I hate Islam for it? Do I hate my parents? I don't know who I hate, but I hate the situation. So I'm sorry. I didn't want to get it too.
No, please don't apologize. I'm really sorry that you went through that. I'm really, really sorry. I feel your pain. I obviously I'm not in your shoes. I cannot feel the full extent of it, and that alone is overwhelming. I'm really sorry you had to go through that. I just want to remind you. I know you know this. I know you know this on a knowledge level, factual level. Just like you know that jinn don't exist, just like you know all that. But I need to remind you that this is not on you. This is not your fault. That everything you did and you believed, you did with honesty, with sincerity. And I know there's a component of guilt there, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a component of not knowing where to direct this hate, and you're not a hateful person, so you're not able to put an outlet to that. And unfortunately, this kind of person, it ends up just turning around on yourself. And I hope you forgive yourself and you're not harsh on yourself for this.
Yeah, no, I'm not that I'm harsh on myself. It is, I mean, I don't want to sound macho or anything like that, but I do martial arts. I'm not scared of men. I mean, I don't want to. I hope you understand. I'm not afraid of men. I'm not. I don't fight anybody, but human to human, no problem there. But being this at this age, not being able to help my child. I mean, if it is a daytime, if we're outside, no one is going to do anything to me or to my child. I mean, nobody. I mean, even you, or even if you're not a martial artist, you're still going to stand up for loved ones and friends and, for weak people. And I can do that. But at night, it's a different story. I become less than my child. I mean, weaker than my child. What I'm trying to say, because my child can walk out to me if he's crying. He can open a door and come to me, but I can't. So anyway, what I want to say lastly is that if you're Muslim, if you're listening to it, please don't teach your children about jinns and hellfire. If you want to talk to them about Islam, talk what is nice about it. Talk about your paradise. Talk about your virgins if you want to, but don't talk to them about the questioning in the graveyard when the graves smash your ribs because you are not a nice person, and so on and so forth. That's just bad. You never know what they're gonna grow up like. So yeah, so I'm sorry. I didn't want to get this emotional. I really didn't want to.
Please don't apologize for that.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine how often do you get a chance to talk about this?
No, never. This is the first time. I said, you know what, forget about it. I just have to because last week just something happened and I was paralyzed. I just can't. And it's just bad. It's just bad. It's just.
Well, I want to commend you for being able to talk about this. If this is your first time, then you've done more than well. Not only is it gonna relieve you to talk about this, but there's so many people who are in your shoes that have thought they were the only one, that have thought that no one understands, that have thought that no one cares, right? But people care.
Yeah, sorry for all the listeners as well. I mean, I didn't want to get into this much. It's just too bad. Last thing I want to say is, we have to support ex-Muslim channels like yours and anyone who's speaking out. Like, for example, as I said, I'm closeted. I cannot talk about that. I mean, because I still have family. I don't want to lose them. And you know what's going to happen if they find out that I'm no longer a believer. I mean, they're not going to kill me, but still, it's going to ruin the relationship that I have. So I'm not doing it, but you're doing it. Apostate Prophet is doing. Ridwan is doing. I mean, Son Ridwan is doing. So I want to thank all of you guys, and let's just support you guys however we can. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
I'm really happy I got to talk to you today, and I'm happy that you're able to share all of this with us.
I have this one question though. This I have heard so many times, and I cannot answer that myself. why do you put ex-Muslim rather than disbeliever or an agnostic or whatever? Why do you still say ex-Muslim? I call myself ex-Muslim, or I feel as ex-Muslim, and there is no way that I can, I can answer that question myself. But I am an ex-Muslim. Not that I'm only an atheist, but I'm an ex-Muslim. Why do we have that ex-Muslim?
I can tell you why I find that label important for the time being. I don't think this label will stick around forever or should stick around forever. But if you say, first of all, it's presumed, right? If your name is Muhammad and you say, I'm an agnostic or I don't believe in Islam, it is presumed that you were born a Muslim or in a Muslim family. We haven't had enough generations of uh, people with Arabic or Muslim names or Muslim backgrounds who have kids, who are not raised religious at all, or their family wasn't even in touch with religion. So it's always a presumption, especially if you have a name or any kind of indication that there's some part of you that's Middle Eastern, Southeast Asian, Muslim. It's presumed already. And there is a need for this label because this is a different situation. So if someone were to say, I'm agnostic, and I'm going to use an example of a Caucasian man called John. If he said, I'm an agnostic, you can't presume, was he born into a Catholic family? Was his family religious? Was he religious? You can't know any of that stuff. And in many cases, it does affect them, leaving religion or not being religious. It might affect their life, but not to the same extent. In most cases, not to the same extent as an agnostic person from a Muslim background or in a Muslim community or a Muslim majority country. There are a lot of taboos. As you can see, I'm wearing a mask, right? Like it's that serious of an issue that we have to fear for our safety. I think that deserves its own conversation, because if we just come out and talk using the same label, people don't realize that there's something different about the situation. And once we reach a point of equilibrium where it's not a big deal that someone was from a Muslim background and they're not Muslim anymore, when people meet somebody and they don't presume that they're Muslim because of what they look like or their name, like somebody can be called Chris or Christopher, and nobody assumes, oh, you're Christian or ex-Christian. When we reach that point, I don't think the label of ex-Muslim is going to be relevant anymore. And that's my reasoning, or part of my reasoning. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's, again, I cannot explain that, but deep down, I understand how important it is that I state that I'm ex-Muslim. One thing that I kind of reason with is that when I was leaving Islam, I didn't know if there is any other people like me.
Mm-hmm.
But more I hear about it, and I guess when I say that out loud at somewhere, I don't know, amongst my Christian or European friends, whatnot, it kind of indicates that there are some people like myself, because leaving Islam is no joke. But when people hear that there's another ex-Muslim, maybe in the room, maybe amongst their friends, and that word can get out to them as well, they don't feel as lonely, because I felt in the beginning, I felt like I was the only one and I was going to burn in hell just because I just couldn't imagine believing in Islam. So that's why I say I'm an ex-Muslim, and this is going to stay for some time. But I really hope that one day we do not have to say ex-Muslim. We just
I
want to be
absolutely
human.
agree with you. Yeah, I forgot that point. That's a very good point. Yeah. Sorry,
Thank
I
you.
interrupted. Yeah.
No. Thank you. I guess I took too much time of yours anyway. Thank
Don't
you,
worry about it.
guys. Yeah.
Thank you for calling in today.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself, please. Bye. Yeah. Thank you very much, Apostate Russian, for talking to me today and sharing your story with all of us. And if he mentioned a few times that he was sorry for getting into this level of detail, or talking about a sensitive topic or something of the sort, and I'd say no, thank you. Not like, don't be sorry for that. If you don't, then nobody will. So thank you again. Okay, there were a lot of supportive comments, and I hope that you can scroll through and read them. I might highlight a few just to show you that people are supportive and people understand. Hassan Radwan saying he can empathize. He spent 15 years teaching Islam to children, and it is not your fault. I think Hassan can understand a lot of your perspective. Jansen is saying, I understand what you're saying. I feel the same about my kids. What have I inflicted on them? I feel your pain. And I hope that everyone here can understand that it's not their fault. And the fact that they're feeling any guilt at all, the fact that they feel like they need to do something differently, is indicative that they have a healthy conscience and that they're trying to do their best. And they were trying to do their best. And I'm sorry, George, that it drove you to that point, but I'm happy that you're here. And on the other side of things, I saw there's a lot of comments not only expressing empathy, but telling you that they feel the same exact way, or they've been haunted by the same fears. On the other side of things, this is a comment from earlier, and also, Danny was saying it's not child abuse to teach your children about your own culture. A child doesn't have knowledge of their own. They have to either learn how to live from you or someone else. That was in the context of a hijab and teaching them about hell if they don't wear a hijab and so on. That was before this story, and I hope the story demonstrates enough what I was about to respond with, which is, no, it is not human. It's not the rights of the parents to abuse their children. This is abusive. We have to stop this sensitivity around, oh, it's a different culture, therefore let them do whatever the hell they want. We are people of that different culture telling you, no, this is not good. And we're not the only ones. And the people who are so cognitively dissonant, they don't think about hell. They don't even think about their own religion, and then they throw it in the faces of those who do think about it. Drive me insane, to be honest. Like, your lack of awareness, your lack of presence, your lack of empathy, not you, not Danny. I'm not talking about Danny. I'm talking about the kind of person who would, like, the kind of believer who would not see an issue with, yeah, so what, hell? So what? I wasn't traumatized. I'm fine. Well, because you don't think about it enough, because you're not empathetic enough for some reason or another. Some of it might not be your fault. I'm not calling this kind of person evil, but this, what I would think is a deficiency of empathy on your end, doesn't mean that this is valid for everyone else, that this is how we should be teaching children. So now, to bring it back to the comment, it is abusive. And this is why we need to address the idea at its core, because we can't force parents not to teach their children about their culture or religion. You can't force that, right? Because at the core of it, you're kind of right. Parents are in control of raising their children, and they have to teach them something. And we're not going to go into detail with each parent and approve, and who's the one approving all of this stuff. It has to be collectively, we have to arrive at conclusions like, religions are rooted in superstition. They're rooted in very primitive ideas. They're very, very outdated. For the most part, most religions are outdated. They're not relevant to us today. To try to apply them in today's context is harmful, and they were harmful back in the day. We just didn't know better. We didn't know that teaching children about hell because of this fictional God that wants to be worshipped so bad, he's okay with the idea of traumatizing a certain percentage of people because it's going to get the others to kiss his ass hard enough. How are we still pretending that this is valid? And I hope that we get to a point where we don't have to ridicule people for their beliefs, but we eventually will all recognize through our own thinking that this is a ridiculous idea, and that anyone teaching their children that they're going to be tortured for not doing this thing or the other is being abusive, because we can't force them not to teach them that. We have to start from the bottom. So no, it's not simply about, oh, just let them teach their girls to wear a hijab, otherwise they'll be tortured forever. It's not that. It's not about a difference in culture. That's what I wanted to say about that. Let me get back to some of the comments before getting to the next caller, which is Dragos. If they're still here. Yes, they're still here. Sorry to keep you waiting, everybody. I'm trying to get to all the callers. Hasan was saying, I despise that doctrine, hell. It has covered the cheeks of this world with tears. It has polluted the hearts of children and poisoned the imaginations of men. It has been a constant pain, a perpetual terror to every good man and woman and child. It has filled the good with horror and with fear, but it has no effect upon the infamous and base. That's a quote from Robert Ingersoll. And here's how I feel about this. So I see somebody like this person's mom calls people either kuffar or Muslims, and that's it. I don't believe that person at their core is evil. And I'm stuck in this in-between position, because people would say, oh, look at how Muslims are behaving and thinking they deserve so-and-so. I recognize that most likely the reason this person's mom is like this is because she herself fears Allah, fears hell. And I am baffled by how most people aren't obsessive about their religion, like I said earlier. It's almost like a rational conclusion for her to think of those people, the non-Muslims, as kuffar, who might pull you into their eternal torture, whether knowingly or not knowingly. This paranoia of hers. It's not because she's a bad person. And that's why I think at the core of it, religion has a lot of potential for harm. Even if the person teaching you it doesn't have the intention of harming you, or doesn't see how it can affect you, doesn't see, like the preacher may not understand that teaching a child about torture in hell before they've even developed the faculties to understand that this is a fictional, fantastical myth, just that's similar to so many other myths that they would acknowledge are myths. They need to get to a point of maturity where they can think for themselves and then assess it. Because once you've slipped in an idea at that young of an age, at that vulnerable of a position, it's not only about kids, anyone in a vulnerable position. And it's not only for the person being weak-minded or anything. The tactics to convince people through fear are effective. That's why they work. And once that idea is in, the person develops with it. They grow up, they build their thinking around it. They build a fortress around this, the cognitive dissonance fortress around this idea, and they continue on. They can be a doctor, they can be an engineer, they can be anything in the world. They can be an artist, they can be a philosopher, but this idea has been solidified because it slipped in so early, or it slipped in a vulnerable time. And that's why we need to tackle it from the beginning. I lost my train of thought. Okay, now we're taking the next caller, which is Dragos. Dragos, I'm adding you in 3, 2, 1. Hi, Dragos. How's it going?
Hello,
Hi.
Apostate Aladdin. Nice to talk to you.
Likewise.
Will you go ahead and take a cup of water now? We've been talking for 2 hours already.
Yeah, I empathize with the people who are fasting, so I'm not gonna drink on stream.
Okay. All right. That's fine. Okay. So, will you ask the question, or I should just go ahead?
Yeah, I'd like to know why is it that you don't believe in Islam?
Okay. Okay. Good. Yeah. Okay. There was a way I thought about this earlier, But yeah, I think it's nice the way you ask. Why is it that I do not believe in Islam? Uh, I think a very clear-cut answer would be one way or the other. I got to understand clearly. It might be sentimental, but I got to understand. But what I think is clear. But I'm always open um, to better understanding. That it's better to stick with knowledge than to stick with beliefs. And the reason is that belief is just something that I simply do not 100% understand, but I just accept it just the way it is. So, unlike knowledge is something that I know for, and it might look simplistic, but if I give an example and say 1 plus 1 is 2, it is knowledge, it is not belief. And it is, I know life can be so complicated, and I think belief can, I mean, belief can be used positively and negatively. For example, if I say, I believe that things are going to get better, just like even from the definition I explained earlier, it simply means that I do not know that things are going to get 100% better, but I expect, I anticipate that it should be 100% better. That could be something good for me to cope with things, for me to cope with life. It is fine for me to keep belief at that level, but for me to keep belief at, I usually say something like, for me to keep belief at the level of me living a natural life in between believing about a supernatural past in a situation where I'm going to be judged in a supernatural future. I look at it like it. Sorry, I'm from Nigeria. It looks like it's kind of look like the flag of Nigeria. So the flag of Nigeria is green, white, green. So basically, I'm born at a time which, and everything around me is purely natural. I do not see men flying at the back of horses into heaven. I do not see men talking to donkeys. I do not see I do not see a man putting a hand into a bowl of water and bringing it out, and water started gushing from the fingers, such that 1,000 people were able to drink to their satisfaction. All those things do not happen in my presence, but one way or the other, it is my duty to believe them. And when I believe them, I also have to believe that uh, there's going to be like another supernatural future as well. Yeah, another supernatural future where I have nothing to worry about. I don't know. I we have 70 virgins or whatever. Yeah, like so it just does not make any sense. So like I live in the natural world, and I understand the ability of humans to exaggerate on what they do not see. And this supernatural thing is not only for Islam. It's
Mhm.
so as a Yoruba person, if you know about the Yoruba in West Africa, so like just like many parts of the world, we have like our own traditional religions. And in these traditional religions, there are folk tales and folklores. For example, there are some beliefs that, for example, that uh, there is one of the goddess, one of the goddess of the river. We call her Oya, and the belief of my traditional people is that that goddess was the one who turned to a river, and that river is one of the biggest river in Nigeria today, the River Niger. The River Niger cuts across Nigeria, so they believe that it was this superpower woman that that turned into that river, this big river. And when Muslims discuss, they say like that is a bullshit belief. How do you believe that a woman turned into a river? It does not make any sense. But it's the same Muslim that believe that Prophet Muhammad dipped his hand into a bowl of water and about 1,000 people drank from his finger. I mean, it's so how exactly do I rationalize both of them? So that is like the primary reason I would say like it doesn't make any sense for me to believe. I'm content with sticking with what I know and what not what I believe,
Mhm.
and and If I do not know, I'm totally satisfied with the fact that I don't know. I do not need to stress myself. I do not need to cook up an answer and say, oh, because I do not know, I have to stick with this. So in summary, that would be why I do not believe. But indeed, like a nitty gritty of things that events that trigger this thought. I was born into a Sufi family, so it was a Sufi family. And like the way the Sufi interprets the verses of the Quran is different from the way the Salafi interpret it. And honestly, it just does not make sense because there are a lot of big claims. There are a lot of very big claims, but nobody can prove, and we just have to hold on to it. It was a struggle getting out of even the Sufism before
Mhm.
getting into Salafism when I got into the university. And I found that the Salafism was much more clear headed than the Sufism, and it reduces a lot of
Clear-headed
stress
as
for me.
in, what does that
Yeah, I
mean?
will explain. Yeah, so
Mhm.
so for example, in Nigeria, it is common the way people around the world, when it's like at the end of the year, December 31st, for example, the Christians go to church and they start praying. And when it is few seconds before 12 o'clock, they intensify their prayers and they shout a lot in the expectation that something is going to happen at 12 o'clock. Right. So the Sufi as well used to do this. We used to do, you know,
Oh, you cut out there. Are you still there, Dragos? Okay. Dragos is gone for now. If he's able to join back, we might have him on if there's time. Um, okay, he's unfortunately he kind of he lost the connection. Uh, thank you for calling Dragos, and to reiterate some of what he said is, but to him, knowledge is more valuable than belief, or it takes precedent. And comparing those religions and beliefs together, you can see that it's hard to justify one over the other. Or the similarity is just they all are just as provable as each other, which is not at all. Oh, okay, he might be back. Okay, Dragos, I'm going to add you again. We'll have to keep the rest of it brief just so I can get to the next caller. But yeah, welcome back. Are you here? I can't hear your audio, unfortunately. I was curious to hear that part about the Sufis emulating what the Christians in that region are doing. Unfortunately, can't hear you.
Do you hear me now? Is it better now?
Yes. Yeah, we do.
Okay. Probably my headset must be becoming funny, so I had to turn it off. Okay, no problem. Yeah, so what I was saying, like from the Sufi to the Salafi, so for the Sufi, you have to do like a lot of askar. It is not weird for them to do like 16,000 Ya Latif, like you recite Ya Latif 16,000 times, or you have to do one specific incantation for 20,000 times. It is not uncommon. Right. But when I came across Salafism, it was like, no, you don't have to do up to that. It is fine to just do it at 100, or like say, Astaghfirullah at 100, like the Prophet used to do at 100. You don't need to do 16,000 and 20,000. And it was more, and then also it brought the clarity in the sense that I do not need to waste my time, especially at December 31st, thinking that something would happen. If anything is going to happen, to change my destiny, it's rather going to be on the night of Laylatul Qadr and not December 31st. So it was a kind of clarity. It was a level up. But where things actually change and where like, okay, everything kind of makes sense was some of it came up when I got married, right? Some of it came up when I got married, and there's this hadith that mentioned that if a woman refuses to sleep with her husband, the angels are going to curse her from the night till the morning. I believe every Muslim is familiar with the hadith, especially Salafi Muslims or Sunni Muslims. I know it wasn't a thing growing up in a Sufi background. I don't think my mother or ever had on anything like that. So, and I usually see the fear in the face of my wife, especially like if she's unable to. And but I usually like, why exactly is she bothered that someone is going to curse her from night till morning? Maybe you're just tired, maybe anything. But I'm not sad. And I usually say like the way she tried to placate me, to like, I hope you're not angry at me. Like, no, I'm not angry at you. I have no reason to be angry at you. And those things got me thinking that what of the days that she might desire me and I am too tired to answer her? Is anybody cursing me from night till morning? Why is it that it is only the woman that is cursed from night till morning if the husband is not happy with her? This shit is not making sense. But it wasn't enough to like to drag me out. It wasn't enough. But many things happened again. At a point in time, I was diagnosed with IBP, and I used to be like super religious. I pray at night. I do extra like super, and I've remember something I've heard from some Salafi sheikhs, that when things go wrong in our lives is because of our sins. Like when things go wrong is because of our sins. So when it got to the point where like I had to had the surgery, the BP got worse, and luckily for to the grace of science is better now and is well managed now. But then it was, then I started asking myself, could it be that I have a sin and that is why I have this blood pressure and this? But later I have to realize that my mom had it as well. And since my mom had it, then this is simply hereditary. This is simply science. There is no, it's not because of I've done a sin anywhere. Then that's those simple two events had me to start re-evaluating everything. Like, no, I have to just re-evaluate all this. Like, if these practical things and easily understandable things, like they just make sense, then I have to re-evaluate everything. And eventually I just have to call it quits. So that's a summary.
Well, I'm glad you got to reevaluate everything, and I'm happy that you've got your BP under control now, hopefully, or got better,
Yeah,
as you had
yeah, much
mentioned. Yeah.
better. Yeah, much better now, much better. I'm
Stress
perfect.
doesn't help, obviously, so hopefully you're less
Definitely.
stressed now that you've resolved these beliefs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. No stress, no worry. Yeah. Yeah, I have no worry, and I understand that everything that happened to me is natural. Everything that happened to me is natural. It's not because of a sin. It's not because, if yeah, it could, some things could be inherited. It is the way it is. So there's nothing you could do about it, and I don't need to beat myself and keep asking for forgiveness for something that even will never go away. Even for like the BP, there was a time I tried to use like the Tiba Nabawi, like the prophetic medicine for it. But I saw that the people who claim to know about the Tib Nabawi, they actually have no understanding of treating high blood pressure. And I know that this could just get worse, and I just eventually abandoned it.
Yeah, I'm glad you took the sensible medical route.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just a summary. There is actually like a lot of things I would like to say, but I know like other people too are on the queue.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing all this with us. I
Yeah.
love how there's a variety of like so many ex-Muslims from very different backgrounds today. Like I haven't
Yeah.
spoken to two ex-Muslims who are similar in a row so far. So yeah, thank you very much for joining.
Yeah. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Take care.
Yeah. Hopefully, I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe probably we could have more time to even talk about some of these things another time, but not today.
Yeah, I'm going to have more talk shows like this, and maybe not in the next one. That's the second episode of this, which is why don't you believe? I'll let other people also go into their reasons, but maybe more specific streams. If you have any ideas, leave them in the chat, and I'll have more varied streams as well.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
Thank you for calling again.
Yeah. You're welcome. All right. Bye,
Have a good
everyone.
one.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye.
All right. Thank you again for calling. I'm taking the next caller. So we've got a few people in the back still. I'll try to get to as many as possible. I'm so sorry if you waited the whole time and I was not able to get to you eventually, but I will try. So more questions. I'm adding you in 3, 2, 1. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, all is well. How are you?
I am good. Thank you for asking.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, it is. It's so interesting how there's so many different folks of various backgrounds and such. Thank you for all the work that you do. Also, much respect to Hassan Radwan, of course. You guys are pretty amazing. Nobody has been able to show our faces so far, so the fact that you guys do that, that's really quite amazing.
Thank you.
I don't think that I can say anything that has not been thought of before or said before, but maybe just talking about it in different ways is interesting. And I'm an ex-Muslim that I kind of was indoctrinated from youth, just like many of us are. Which that alone is just so interesting, because if you're born into it and from the get-go, that's what they're telling you is the real deal. They're getting you from before you can even have the ability to challenge that. But it's just so interesting. I think human psychology, we want to have reasons. We want to, we always ask about what's the purpose of life, as though there is this thing that exists, and no, you have to craft it. You have to make it for yourself. And but the fact that Islam is so certain, provides so much certainty, I think people gravitate towards that. They resonate with it. But it was never really enough for me. I think the whole thing inherently is such a contradiction. You have a God who is, the creator and has been around forever. And now all of a sudden he wants to make humans so they can worship him. That right there is like, I thought he doesn't need anything. Like, why do you need people to worship you? So like,
No, and don't forget,
just right there,
he
it's
already
kind
had the angels worshiping him, but they have no free will. So he wanted to mix
Right.
it up a little bit. So he's like, I want them to have free will and worship me.
It just flies in the face of the only way that works is if there is some need or desire for worship, respect, whatever, acknowledgement, right? To me, that's a
Validation.
very human thing.
Yeah.
Very human thing, right? So like, so just the fact that we say that all powerful, omnipotent, omniscient doesn't need anything, always been around, whatever you want to describe, but there's this flaw right there glaring at us. And I feel like I could go on so many various tangents, but
well, I want to ask you, like, how did you transition? Like, what was it that made you?
Oh yes.
click?
Well, this is this is also kind of a frustrating situation, because in the way that I grew up, there's a lot of guilt that happens if you want to question, or you want to not be associated with Islam, leave Islam. But man, that guilt from the family and your parents. And so, you said several times, so I wanted to listen to this whole episode, but I got pulled into watching my kids and my nephews at the playground, so I couldn't listen. And I heard a couple of things here and there, but you said the word empathy. And, ever since I was a child, I think that, I experienced this, because when I was very young, I saw, I was taken to India with my parents, which is where they're from. And you see dire poverty there. And it makes you wonder, why is this happening to this person, but not to me? And okay, well, the answer is that a God made it that way. Well, that doesn't make a ton of sense, but okay, if that's what you're saying. So you go along and you learn to go along. So I went along. What happened was, eventually I no longer was able to keep up with it, because the time came where it was time for me to propose to my girlfriend, and we became married, and she was from a different religion, and I didn't have it in me to tell her that you need to convert in order to become married to me. Like, that's not fair. Like, why am I gonna act like I even have the superiority to tell you that you need to, let alone the whole thing that I had been faking this whole time and just kind of going along with it to not hurt other people's feelings, but now to tell somebody else that they would have to do that. And the whole, it was really a big struggle, because I was thinking, how can I have my cake and eat it too? Like, how can I not have to expose myself for having these beliefs that go against what everybody else believes, but, not set the stage for misery down the line? So I had to confront this. You know, I thought I even would think like, hey, I'll just keep up this act until my parents are gone, and then I won't have to worry about it anymore. You know, I can really be myself. But of course, you know, I couldn't put this on another person. So that's how it all came to be, where what I had kept inside and known for a long time, I kind of just brought it out into the world, not super publicly because that can be dangerous, but you know, it got me to that situation where that's what it took for me to actually speak up and say something.
You'd be surprised at how many people were in your position, whether they actually did believe strongly or somewhat, or they were keeping up appearances, but they had to inspect it because they were making a big life-changing decision that involves themselves or somebody else, and they wanted to know for certain, right? Like if you're going to invite your girlfriend into Islam or to convert so that you can get married, do you believe in it, right? You have to look at it yourself. Like,
Right.
wait, so are we both hypocrites? Am I just going along with this, or am I sincerely inviting her to the truth? So yeah, you're not the only one. A lot of people have gone through that.
Yeah, and you know, so that's where I really had to confront it, because I really thought that I was just gonna, you know, get away with just keeping it hush hush, you know, but that doesn't really work, and you can't be your full authentic self. And so, you know, that's something I've learned. And there's so much more, you know, the hell thing. I mean, it just if this all-powerful God doesn't need anything, why does he have to, you know, torture you forever? You know, all of this stuff that we got, you know, like, I don't mean to belittle people's religious beliefs. So I'm the type of person that, you know, if people derive value from religion, that's wonderful. I don't want to stand in the way of that, as long as it's not harmful. You know, but it it just doesn't make sense. You know, and all this stuff, I don't mean to belittle people's beliefs. It came from a guy. It came from a guy, you know? I mean,
We have to trust that he is in contact with somebody else. Yeah.
yeah. And when I started listening to some of the work out there about how
You're cutting out.
involved, and it's like,
Sorry, can you
yeah,
repeat that?
that
You
really
said
seems
when
like it
I
could be.
can you repeat that? You
Can you
said
hear
when I started to listen to some of the work out there.
when I learned about
Mhm.
can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, just the work out there about how epilepsy may have been involved in all of this, and mental health issues could have been involved. That
Shout out to friendly ex-Muslim and Abdullah Samir and Abdullah Gondal, right? Is that where you heard about this?
Abdullah
If you
Gondal.
haven't, you should check it out. Abdullah Gondal, yeah.
Yes, that is the two Abdullahs, you know, and even listening to Abdullah Gondal's story, who, like, he was deeply ingrained in Islam, and this guy was able to exercise critical thinking. Like, that's the whole thing. This is the frustrating thing. And Hassan Radwan said this too. It just quells the critical thinking. It just shuts you up. And how frustrating to see so many people trapped. They don't experience life to the fullest. You know, it's sad, you know, and you know, personally, I've been affected very deeply by this. I have a lot of family relationships that have been fractured by this, unfortunately. And yeah, man, it kind of sucks because of what you think, what you believe in, you know. So yeah, there's so many different things, you know, that I could question, but you know, just at the very root of it all, like, it's all a contradiction and it's all flawed. And I think it's okay for us to acknowledge that and be okay with that, you know. And there's always going to be more questions than answers.
Yeah, that's hey. I'm borrowing the line from a comedian, but he said that's what we call a callback in the showbiz. That's bringing it back to the name.
Perfect way to end. You know, I don't have too much else to offer this time, but if you do this in the future, man, we could have a lot of fun and interesting conversation. And I mean, you know, like, we come from a Shia community, and there's flagellation, and you're looking at yourself like, why are people, cutting themselves? And okay, here I'll end on this, okay? You're familiar with the Shia traditions and Ashura and
bit,
such.
but not as much as I'd like to be. No.
Okay. Well, it's a very sad, occasion every year. They mourn, the Prophet's grandson was brutally murdered and tortured, and it's a horrible story. Okay, but look, man. Okay, if we believe that, God made it that way. Okay, like, everybody says that, oh well, the sacrifice is what saved Islam, and it saved Islam, but we're mourning it every year, and people are cutting themselves open over the sadness they feel over this. But this is how God chose it to be, didn't he? I mean, anyways, that'll open up a whole other can of stuff, but too many things that just don't make sense.
More questions than answers, one might say.
There we go. Thank you, bro. Appreciate it.
Thanks for calling in, man. Take care.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye. All right, so we're getting to the next callers. We got 4 more, getting to them in the order that they came in. So we've got Tree Mind. I'm adding you in 3, 2, 1. Hi, Tree.
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, can you speak a little louder or bring your voice a little closer to the mic?
Of course. I'm sorry for my English is not very good. I am from French, so it's not my first language.
That's okay.
So to explain about why I wanted to talk in there, it's because I was born Muslim, so I was born in a Muslim family. And from a very young age, I didn't really mind it. So it was like breathing or just living your life. I was Muslim, and no question about it. But when I started to grow up, and when I started like to seek for my rights and to seek for my free the ability to speak for myself, I find myself often in the Muslim community be shut it down. For example, in France, you can. I'm sorry. In France, you have we name it the bac. The bac is like a big, is like your diploma at the end of your courses. And I was taking classes with my fellow Muslim boy and girl. We had specific classes when they can help us with French, with mathematics, and all that. I was quite good at scholarship, so I had it quite easy. So I was really looking forward to these classes to help my friends or other, and to seek approval from my Muslim community to be helping other Muslim and to be able to succeed and make my mother proud and my family proud. But when I came to these classes, they told us in the first class of mathematics, please girl, don't stand up. Don't go to the board to answer the question. Just do it at your desk and let the boy do it. And if you want to help, raise your hand, and I will give you the permission to talk. And from that moment, and even before that, I felt in the Muslim community infantilized. I was a child, always seeking for permission, always seeking for approval from other one. In my religion, even they were telling me to stay at home, to not seek a lot of things from this life, to be obedient for your husband. You have to be chosen by your husband. You can't really take a part of choosing him, talking to him, be confident about yourself. It was always about that. So when I started to grow up, I was a little bit like a tomboy. I really liked video game. I liked to discuss about a lot of things. I was the girl in the family that asked too many questions. And I found myself always, they were telling me no, you're a girl, you can't do that. Or you're a girl, don't ask this sort of question. You will see when your husband will come, you can go travel, you can go do this and that. And I felt so deprived of my personal rights. People always waiting for someone to get me somewhere, or always waiting for my parents to get me. So it was very, very, very restrictive. And I felt like a child. Even you're 18, you're 19, they always told you, no, you're a woman, please be careful about that. And they were always trying to sugarcoat that. But no, I hated it when they said, like, you're a jewel or you're a pearl. You have to be careful about yourself. You have to hide yourself from men. They will hurt you. And God made this to protect you. But it's not true. Like, I saw it in my, when I go to French school, so like not Muslim school when you teach Arabic or art, men were respectful. I had in my class a lot of men, a lot of guys, and they're always so respectful. Anyone hurt me, like, there were, but in my classes, I had French classmates and I have also Arabic classmates. And I found myself in some like debates, or always being like, how I can put that? I was like confronting like the Muslim men, because they were always like have a sight on you. Like, if I'm in class and I talk too much, or I raise my hand too much, they will always like look at you like a little weird. And I never understand that until that one day when we make a debate club in French class, and we were talking about rights about women, and we came to like abortion and all that. And for me, Muslim men were like to be open, because they said to us, the soul came to the body of the child only in the like second trimester, I think, like her 40 day. And I waited for the Muslim man to speak up and to be like, yeah, girl, got you right. And I found myself surrounded by people that were like, no, the woman should keep her child. She does not have the right to kill it. And I was like, I felt even more deprived of all my rights. So I guess it was what I was waiting to talk about in this chat, because I see there are lots of ex-Muslim men that come in the internet, and I would like to thank Mimzivid, is the daughter of Hassan, if I don't know. Yes,
Yeah, Mimzivid, yeah.
And she really helped me in my course to leave Islam, because at the beginning I was very worried and not confident about myself, not confident about what I was thinking. I was telling myself, maybe you're wrong, you didn't understand that, you don't like, you're human and you don't have all the possible access to knowledge, and you're missing something that will keep all this, the Quran and the Muslim all together. But I didn't find it. And even more as a woman, I felt like treated so badly that I cannot like stay in this religion and be happy with it.
I'm sorry that you went through that, and on the other hand, I'm glad that there was someone like Mimsy for you to watch and see represent your thoughts. Because do you feel like there are a lot more male ex-Muslim, YouTubers or content creators, and for the reason obviously is that women get scrutinized a lot more, and it's more difficult for women to speak up in general in the Muslim community, let alone in this context. Did you find that you were reluctant to listen to the guys, but less reluctant to listen to the girls?
I don't think necessarily reluctant, but you tend to seek for someone that like you, that have the same concern as you. When I was looking at guys like you, Apostate Aladdin and Hassan Warda, I kind of seeked the approval first of girl item, I think, because I felt more close to them. And we have the whole veil topic. Should I put the hijab on? Because I put it very, very early. I think I was 12 or 11 when I put it. So it was like my mom told this, so my mom, it's my example in life, so I have to do like her, and I put it. But I knew from the bottom of my heart that if one day I take it off the veil, I knew that it was forever and that I will quit the religion. I knew it, so it was like it was a little bit difficult, I think, because I was so centered around the veil. I told myself, like, I have to seek first this question, so I have to go and watch other women who talk about that. Maybe I misunderstood what the veil means. Maybe it's really for my own good. And I wanted also to talk about the hypocrisy that I can face when I talk to other Muslim and other women, primarily in French. Like I live in French, so we have the whole debate about the veil, but you can wear it. Like if I go to the street and I wear it, nobody will harass me, nobody will come and take it off my head. But we have this kind of hypocrisy to say, yeah, veil is a choice, veil is liberating, it can give you all this wonderful thing. But all the women that I talked to never really stick the religion, like never understood it, why we even put it, that or like why it's for modesty, is for like your God. But how God can judge you by your modesty? How can judge you? God can tell you, I give you this body so you can live with it, live with it, but you have to hide it because you're a woman, and you will give like lust to men and all that. It's like victim blaming. So if someone came and look at me, it's because of me, and I have a lot of body issue. From this, I can't like even put a skirt on or like show my arm, because I feel so vulnerable when I do that, because I'm always like, so if a man talk to me or disrespect me in that moment, is because of me. So I had a man like come and ask for my phone number, and I will be, it's because I went that way. It's why God told me not to. So it's very like it's messed up with your mind. So that's it. Yeah. I think I didn't quite answer the question. I'm sorry for that.
No, you did in a way, because, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding, but you were saying you noticed a lot of things in Islam that were unfair to women. You noticed how you were being treated and viewed differently, and that was over a long period of time that you were noticing these things. And now you're talking about the long-term effects of that, and even though you don't believe in Islam, how that makes you feel after leaving. Is that all correct? Was it did you start realizing that Islam is not the truth because of how it views and treats women?
It's exactly that, but I think the woman part came in evidence because I was a woman. But it's very dumb. But I started questioning Islam when I was in class, and one of my French classmates came and told me, yeah, I know why you don't eat pig is only because in the time of the Prophet they cannot keep meat of pig like safe, and it was because of that they made the study. You know, it's silly. It's not like a really big thing. But we have after that we had like the Charlie Hebdo all thing when a journalist was murdered, and I found myself not able to protect my religion and not able to defend it against all the what people were against. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Like against what, the things that people were saying about Islam?
Yes, they were they were bringing so much good points, and I was like always like phased. I was like, what can I answer to that? What can I present as good thing that Islam bring to people? Like I'm from Algeria too, so it's I live in France, but my mother is from Algeria. And when I go to Algeria, I don't see like really good people or very inspiring people by religion. All I see is closed women that stay at their home, and they're all chatting about each other because that's all that they have to do. Like they don't have a place where to go to study, or place that bring them comfort, or that like push them to do study or other things. And I don't feel like Islam brings any good thing to like Middle Eastern or Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia, all this country.
It hasn't fixed those issues. If not, it's caused them in many ways. But even if it didn't cause these misogynistic issues and whatnot, it hasn't fixed them, right? You can see that it hasn't improved anything.
It hasn't improved anything, and it has stolen the culture of this country, like the Kabyle culture or even the Algerian culture. You can't find it anymore. There were Algeria pre-Islamization and after Islamization, excuse me. And I found that so awesome that there are so many cultures, so many way of thinking life or dressing and all that. And Islam just came and told you like, no, Islam now is your culture. You have to put all aside and just think about Islam. And it's so upsetting because I believe that there are so many genius and so many good people that can bring so much improving in life, but they can't because Islam came and shut it down. I'm so sad about that.
I feel the same way. I feel like we don't talk enough about this, and the reason I haven't talked about this topic enough is I need to educate myself a lot more before I start discussing this topic. But how Islam kind of eradicates cultures, right? Like something as simple as the way that women dress, and I'm not talking about provocatively or anything, just dressing in colorful clothing. That's colorful clothing brings attention to the person wearing it, therefore it is not mustahab or it is outright haram, therefore people stop doing it, and so on and so forth. And then you lose a lot of these parts of different cultures, and it just becomes this one big culture of just dress this way, right? Black abaya is it's not that Islam says specifically wear a black abaya, but that's the kind of where the mind goes eventually. It's sad. And then we have the Muslims have the audacity to blame culture for all these issues, to say, well, it's the women are mistreated because it's the culture. But
exactly,
Islam is the culture.
And it's so upsetting because like the same people that say that only from like European country, French, America, like they have they're alone in their little house. They can go out, they can go to the bar, they can go all what they can do what they want. But they talk about all other Arabian country and speak for them when they don't have the right to do so. Like I see so many men and women talking about, oh, it must be so good to live in a Muslim country when you have the Sharia law that is applied and where women are all behaving well. But if you want this type of life, why don't you go to Afghanistan? Why don't you go to Algeria and promote that type of life? No, you're here. You're in France. You go to vacation to the USA. You go to England. You go eat fast food. You can eat whatever you want. But then you come to France and you're in your little bed like a little cozy. You come and talk about other people and their rights. And I just find that also very upsetting.
Hypocritical for sure. I don't know what would push people. I don't think anything would, but I want to push those people not to be like, hey, get out of our land or whatever. But okay, if you want a land that is so Islamic, start from a starting point that is already kind of Islamic, right? Like Algeria, it is not true Islam, whatever. Okay, but it's closer to Islam than France. So go there.
Exactly.
Right? And make the correct true Islam. Don't ask for all of these accommodations and changes to make it more Islam-like, or just complain about how, oh, so much corruption, moral corruption in here. It baffles me. But I hope that someday they find their community, and even then I'd feel sorry for the children being born into these communities, but at least like they would have, then they would see the harm themselves and maybe they would leave it. But in this middle position, things are not going to get better that way.
And I just wanted to talk about just a little thing, and after that I will let my place to another one. I know how much joy that can bring to talk to people like that and to share your experiments. But like what I have a big trouble with is letting the good side of Islam in the way. Like I found myself when I was thinking about Islam and all that it's brought me a little bit of good and good not manner but a way of thinking that I don't think that I would have gotten to if I was not in an Islamic family. I know that it's.
Can you give an example of that? I'm curious.
I was thinking about relationships to boy. I know that Islam don't really prone a healthy relationships with boy, but I find myself more critical about relationships of other because I'm from an Islam upbringing. For example, if I could see in front of my eyes this and this one had get together, but I know that gonna split up because you can see they don't really like each other and they don't fit when Islam tell you yes go in relationships if you're gonna marry a real commitment. But I see around myself like a lot of other people that get relationships without this commitment. And I ask myself, like, if I wanna raise my children like in a good way, can I still bring them that without Islam? I don't know if I
I
made
think
it
you
clear.
can. I get your point about how you think, had you been born in the environment where you see people not having that mentality, except if it's coming from Islam, I understand why you think, and that's a good thing that Islam provided, right? But or I mean, I'm saying I understand why you think so, but you can provide this for your children without Islam. You can teach them these values or why you think that's a good way to handle that situation. I can't speak for how we can change that for all of society, but at least on a small scale, I think you have control over that.
Thank you. It's
Yeah.
very comforting
Mhm.
because I was like always like being glad they will drink alcohol, you know, like a very Islamic way. Like they will drink alcohol, they will go to party, and they will make love and all that, and they will commit to the wrong person. They will fall into drugs. You know, that's all
Mhm.
Islamic kind of way of seeing life. And
I
I
think
never
you do a better job of actually preventing them from going down those paths if you explain why they're bad than just say because it's bad because God said so, because otherwise torture. I think they would be more understanding that way or less likely to go down that route.
Thank you. Thank you very. I really wanted to thank you all of you, like Apostate Prophet, Apostate Aladdin, and Hamza, Mitzivid, and Hassan Wadan. Like I found myself like in the bad moments and all this moment when I doubt and I don't know what to do anymore. To seek comfort in your video, and it's very nice of you to do that and to made all that community.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to hear that it's helping. Yeah, thank you. Take care,
you.
Tree, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Sorry, everyone, my cat is walking all over me. Well, both my cats are very hungry right now, and they're very angry at me, but we still have 2 more callers, so I'm going to get to them, and then I'm going to go feed my cats. And Misha Hector was saying Theremin Trees on YouTube talks about infantilization. So the caller was talking about how they infantilize women. And Theremin Trees, it's a YouTube channel. He has a background in therapy and mental health. He deconstructs a lot of these topics very, very well. It's not specifically about Islam, but a lot of it is relevant to people who have left Islam or other religions or cults or high control groups. So definitely recommend checking him out. All right, next caller is Mehdi. Mehdi, I'm adding you in 3, 2, 1. Hi, how are you doing?
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Thank you very much for taking me in. I'm a Bangladeshi ex-Muslim living in Bangladesh, and there is not much time here as well because it's almost the Sehri time ending. My mother is going to come knock at my door any moment, so it's better to be quick. There are many reasons. I left Islam quite a while ago. I think 6-7 years ago, when I was still a teenager. So the first thing that as I said, there were many things, but there are 1 or 2 things that really had a big effect on me. One of those things was that because I'm in Bangladesh, the largest minority after Muslims are Hindus, and I had a good Hindu friend, and we tried not to talk about religion because it becomes problematic when you talk about religion. And it was just one day we were sitting in our classroom, and somehow we started talking about religion. I don't exactly remember what I said. I think I said something like, your religious books are corrupted or something like that. Because Muslims don't take Hinduism or any other polytheistic religions seriously at all, like zero, no seriousness. Like you worship cows. I mean, what am I going to do? That's the mindset, right? And I said something, and he replied to me in this really snarky voice, like, and what happened? Allah dropped Quran from the sky. Like the way he said it, I used to think it's before internet, right? I was in school. I used to think there is this idea that everyone respects Islam. Everyone thinks it's really awesome. even if they cannot follow it, maybe there are family constraints, they cannot live the religion, but everyone thinks that it's probably true. It's probably
But
a
they
good
deny
one.
it or they can't join it or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. You have to justify the kafir thing, right?
Mhm.
Because otherwise then the kafir doesn't make much sense. And in the voice he said this, and I wanted to reply that, yeah, technically, yes, it dropped from the sky because Gabriel came down from the sky, but I didn't say it. I just said, okay, let's not talk about it. But it really get into my head that like the way he said that sentence to me, it made me realize that the way I don't give any legitimacy to his religion, he doesn't give any legitimacy to my religion. He doesn't think, he sees like zero legitimacy in my religion.
Mhm.
Like, it really shocked me to know that, like because then it immediately came to my mind, like, why is he going to hell then for, right? Because the standard narrative is that he's polytheist on top of being a disbeliever.
Even worse, yeah.
worships multiple gods and goddesses, and
Yeah.
then to make things worse, I realized that when I pray to Allah, I have this level of sincerity. I really believe, and I'm sincere when I pray. I came to realize, because I used to hang out with him, I realized when he prays to his goddesses, he is not any less serious or any less whatever you say.
Hypocritical.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not
He believes
hypocritical. Yeah,
just
he
as
actually
much.
believes.
He believes just as much that I do. Like, then it made even more difficult to justify why he is probably going to hell.
Mhm.
It really bothered me. But you know what happens? You try to forget this kind of things. You don't question these things for too long. And then internet happened, and things changed because, well, when I first get into internet, it was 2010, and there was Bengali blogs
Mhm.
where people were openly claiming themselves to be atheists. And I didn't, for the longest time, I did not believe that someone could be atheist. Like, I can get you questioning which religion is true, but atheist, like, how can you be an atheist? That was in my head for a very long time. I just thought, like, everyone claimed these people are like Hindus pretending to be ex-Muslims. These are like raw agents. Raw is like the Indian CIA. So and
It's all sorts of conspiracies make more sense than that there is a
like,
real kafir
some
who
people would
doesn't
say
believe.
these are Mossad agents.
Yeah.
Like, as if they care what happens in Bangladesh. Like, we don't matter much. We don't have any military might or anything. And also this one thing, a friend opened a Facebook page. He used to post like motivational quotes, and he made me an admin and told me you should post some from time to time. And I used to post some from time to time. Then it came to me that, well, why don't I post motivational Quranic quotes? You know, there must be a lot. And I started searching, and at that time, if you search for something, you would get answers from Yahoo Answers. It was a big thing. And I didn't find many good answers. There were some quotes that, as a Muslim, I liked, but I was looking for something that everyone would like that. Then I thought, okay, why don't I search for myself? You know, I should read it myself. I opened a Quran that we had in our house with Bengali translation, very dishonest translation, by the way, putting words in brackets,
Yeah.
words that don't belong there, like, you know, beat your wife, likely is put into bracket in the translation. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I started reading. I understood Fatiha, then I got into Baqarah, and it really bothered me that what does it start from? What does the story start from, and where is it going? Like, what happened at the first? I expected something like the cave in, you know, the Hira story at the beginning or something like that, and no chronology. What's happening? Like, there's so little story, and from time to time you get to know about Firaun. Like, what's this jumping around? And I
You'd expect some structure from a perfect book, right? Some kind of structure, yeah.
I was really baffled because I learned so many stories. Stories make sense, but the book itself is not making much sense. And we had, my uncle had a book with tafsir, like 2 tafsirs in one book. I said, okay, I should probably follow that one. And I started reading. There were like 2 or 3 verses, and there are 2 pages of exegesis. And there are so many stories, background, and so many things. I was reading it. Okay, now it makes sense. But how do these people know, like, so much background? And here I have just one line, and what does it come from? Is it reliable? And I tried to read. I went to different chapters and tried to read, and I could not really understand what's happening. The kind of reverence I had for this book, it really, really went down. Like at that point, if someone asked me, "Hey, isn't Quran the best book in the world?" I probably wouldn't answer that. I mean, it doesn't seem like a very coherent book. It cannot make good sentences and whatnot. Maybe sound great. Yeah, sounds great when you recite it in Arabic, but I don't understand the language, so I
A
don't
lot of
know
things
what.
sound great in a lot of languages, right?
Yeah, like everyone. Bangladesh is so like they're like listening to Despacito, doesn't know what the lyrics mean.
Right.
It
It
sounds
was
great.
one of the most popular songs in the world, and I don't know what the lyrics are, to be honest.
Yeah, and a lot of like Bollywood songs have like really the kind of lyrics that as a Muslim you wouldn't want to sing along, because Bollywood songs have this idea that you see God in your girlfriend. This kind of lyrics is very common because they don't have problem with that. Okay, so it was one big issue, and when I went into this internet debate thing, people were debating, and to be honest, the Bengali debate scene in the blogs did not really bother me much because there were a lot of name calling. Like we are good at this. We just insult each other, insult the hell out of each other, and threats, always threats. And then I somehow got into the English stuff, and it was not YouTube at that point because internet was really slow. So I found some blog posts. Okay, in the blog post, it got really wide. Okay, and I think what really did it for me was lots of scientific miracle claims. Okay, so a lot of scientific miracle claims. I never took those seriously because I thought it was really not a good idea to use science to say that, look, my book is true because science says this. Because the same people claim if something is not in the same line with science, that science changes all the time. I mean, so it's not a good argument. So I don't know where I read that, but in some blog post I read that Quran predicts that human fingerprints are unique. There's this miracle claim. This one sounded ridiculous to me. I searched in Google and I found a bunch of refutations. It's totally bogus. And I was scrolling and I found some Christian apologist website, the one I think David Wood and his friends used to run or still runs, I don't know. So their debate format was like going back and forth. So there was some other Muslim guy who used to like answer to their claims, and they'll go back and forth. So when I got into this kind of a back and forth debating style, because what I previously used to do is like you make a video making some claim that this is a scientific mistake. Then there is an apologist, my favorite apologist. I go to their video, this is refuted. This is stupid, and I'm saying okay, refuted. But when you go back and forth and you keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, then my head starts like exploding. Like, okay, it's not making much sense. Like the defenses
Why is it
are
taking
not.
so much back and forth at all, right? It should be very easy to just
Yeah,
give an
yeah,
answer that no one can refute,
yeah,
really.
yeah. But
Yeah.
the defense mechanism, because you don't want it to be false. Like, when you get the slightest hint that it's possibly false, you don't want to go deeper. Okay, so the one thing I really had to go deeper is sexual slavery, because I was making excuse for slavery, whatever I used to make, because Indian subcontinent never had that much of slavery. So I didn't know what does it mean to be a slave much. And when I started looking for like what slavery meant, it's not simply being a servant or whatever. And but when I became convinced that sexual slavery is actually allowed, it really is allowed. It's not some hoax or something. It really is allowed. Then I tried to justify it, and I could not, because this one is not justifiable. Like, what excuse I'm going to make? And the first problem was not because that it's immoral. Here's the thing, interesting thing. The first problem I had with sexual slavery is because we were taught that sex is something that you have with your wives, like at most 4. Okay, so it's very conservative thing. But now you're telling me that you can have as many as you want, as long as you're a rich guy, you can have one. You can say, okay, I don't like this one anymore. I'm getting another one. So this didn't seem very conservative type to me.
I mean, it's at least in a relationship or whatever, even if it's not a marriage, there's consent between both. There's some kind of other stuff aside from just the sexual aspect, right? There's more work to do, even, but somehow it's more okay for society for people to buy it, and buy it not just, not just prostitution, but buy a person. It's absurd. But you didn't think of it as immoral. You just thought of it as contradicting something else in Islam.
Yeah, that's how it started, because I don't know why. I was young, so that probably played some part, and I don't live in the part of the world where you are taught about slavery and such. Because in the Indian subcontinent, you don't learn anything about slavery, like barely anything. Like, I don't think anyone here had like ancestors who were slave or anything. So because that's why it is like that. Then I came to understand the moral issues with it, because like, women are useful as workforce. Muhammad used to gift female slaves to his wives, so they were useful to his wives. So you don't have to make it about sex. They can work. So I just could not justify it, but I left it because of that. But I had some dissatisfaction because I left for emotional reasons. But then I realized that I didn't really left for emotional reasons, but it was because of inconsistency in my arguments. Because I could make some sort of argument to say that it did not happen, like it's not real, it did not happen. But in that case, I have to be consistent about all sorts of claims about Islam. Like, if I say this tafsir is wrong, this hadith is wrong, even though it is sahih, okay, I got rid of one problem. Okay, but then what about other things? Because at that point I was starting to meet with some people online who some were jihadists, some were very liberal. Like, there's this one guy who told me that you can eat pork, like, no problem. I'm like, what do you mean you can eat pork? They says, like, you could not eat pork back then because people didn't know how to cook pork properly. You had to raise them properly. And I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? Even if it's true, like, it's haram. Then he's like, he knew how to answer to this kind of questions. So his approach was like making everything vague. Like, you cannot know anything about for certain. And he asked me, like, you trust hadith? And yes, I trust hadith. And he's like, okay, so here is this hadith where it says, like, women's testimony is worth half. Okay, what about that? I don't agree with that. So I have to find some apologist argument, and it says, well, women back then were busy with household works. They probably didn't know much about finance or anything, or they were very emotional, yada yada. Nowadays, you can have equal weight of witnesses for men and women. And I gave him the reply, and he tells me that, who told you that? It doesn't say that in the hadith. You are making this up. The reasoning, you are making this up. So the way he's making reasons up to say that today we can eat pork because we know how to raise and cook pork properly. Okay, so this kind of making up reasons to justify this kind of things. And like, one of the things, 6 years old Aisha thing, and like, people so easily say that, okay, it was back in the days, as if they're talking about some sort of fashion trend. Like, okay, men used to wear this kind of pants 50 years ago. Why don't we wear it today? Back in the days, people used to wear that. Like,
it's just,
as if
you can see that there's a lot of just trying to make it make sense rather than actually
like,
looking for the answer.
Yeah, if you ask why not today? We could wear like old-fashioned clothes today. Doesn't matter. Like, okay, I didn't have much to talk about, and it's almost the very ending time. My mom is calling me. I have to pretend, but the good thing is I started fasting from 8 years old, and I have no problem pretending.
Well, I'm glad that it's not very difficult for you. So hopefully that makes this month,
I don't ever
easier to
feel
bear.
good. Recently, one of my friends got married. He was in love with a hijabi girl, and he has to he really has to fast. It's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard for it.
Well, thank you so much, by the way, for joining today. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thank you very much
Yeah,
for
for
the
sure.
work you do and everyone does.
Thanks, Mehedi.
Yeah.
It's time to go. Take care. Bye-bye. Oh, it's definitely sahur time. Okay, we have one last caller. By the way, thank you everybody for attending so far. I appreciate you enjoying this conversation with me. The last caller we're taking today, Deda. I'm adding you in 3, 2, 1. Hey, how's it going?
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I would have my camera on, but I'm a little sick. So yeah.
That's okay.
So I guess like, do you want me to answer the question? Do you want to ask me questions or?
Well, yeah, I'd like to know. So first of all, were you ever a believer? And if yes, what made you not believe? Or
Okay.
if not, then why do you find Islam not believable?
Cool. So I think present or ask the question. Answer the question is to start with why I'm no longer why I'm atheist, like why I'm ex-Muslim, right? Like, because I think that they're like more or less congruent, but like not completely. Like there are reasons why I'm not specifically Muslim, right? I was raised in a very religious household. My father's an Islamist from Egypt, so like we're involved with the Muslim Brotherhood. So yeah, so.
And the reason why you're not showing your face is because you're sick?
Yes. Yeah, no,
Okay.
I'm actually very openly ex-Muslim and atheist. My parents know, and and I'm queer, so there's that. So yeah.
Yeah. They're so angry about that. They're kind of not worried about the other one.
Oh well, I mean, it's like.
Or are they accepting? I'm sorry, I don't mean.
No, they're not accepting. Well, my dad isn't accepting. So my father's Egyptian, my mom is not. So I was raised like in the U.S. And I was raised in like a very religious, very Islamist environment. And I think, well, one, I should say, I started thinking of myself as not Muslim very early on. I think I was like 12 or 13 when I started to realize, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm atheist at this point. And then I went back, right? So during my teenage years, I did become like Muslim, quote unquote Muslim again, right? Back and forth, until eventually when I was like 18 or 19, I was like, no, this is it. And I realized I was being an apologist every second of every day. I was just in my head being like,
to other people, or just like between yourself, like an insider?
Yeah, to other people and in general, to the point where people could even see it, where like I knew, like they could hear the instant, like almost the insincerity in my. Wasn't actually like convinced of what I was defending, where I was like, oh yeah, Muslims do that. I'm like, I guess it's kind of wrong, but yeah, I mean, I wasn't actually convinced of it. So I think, well, I'm going to start with like where my doubt first came from. So I've always been someone who asked a lot of questions. I always was very curious, and there were just a lot of questions that could never be answered. I remember asking in like private school, asking a teacher, like, if just a very simple, innocent question that kids ask. Like, I just asked, okay, well, if God knows what I'm going to do, why does he get angry when I do it? Right? And I was just like, okay. They couldn't give me a straight answer. They were just like, oh, blah, 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 not important. And I was like, why is something that's so central to like morality and so central to the way we live our lives in terms of following this religion, why is that a question that no one has bothered to ask or answer? So yeah, so that happened. And so I continued to just ask myself these questions. I was very into like paleontology and biology growing up. So obviously learning about biology and seeing the beauty of evolution made me like love biology even more. But I did know that religion, or at least the way it was taught to me, and to most Muslims, to be honest, the most religious people in general, is that it doesn't line up with religion. And so I think so then I had to start asking I had to like start, that was the beginning of the rationalization in my head, trying to be like, oh, well, maybe when God said he made Adam, what he meant was that he made the first Homo sapiens or something like that. So eventually it was just that process, just constantly questioning myself, and of these doubts that didn't line up with the way the world is, you know. But I think so that was me when I first became atheist. It was Islam doesn't make sense scientifically, right? But what I felt was I felt like I had to be Muslim because it was a community I came from, and I felt like I would probably not have a future not being Muslim. This was maybe partly subconsciously, and I just found myself like forcing myself to be Muslim again, right? Telling myself I was. And I honestly think part of that was me, like I told myself it was me wanting to be Muslim and really it was me wanting to be straight. Like I kind of married the two in my head and said like, oh, I just need to be a good Muslim, and then like in parentheses straight boy, you know? And then I think what made me realize, I just realized I was an apologist. And more so, that's when I started to question the moral and like value system of Islam. And also when I started to, and that's also when I started to become more political and have opinions about policy. And that made me question Islam because I started to view Islam objectively and not as a religion. And I think that's where I am now, like in terms of how I view Islam and how I view things in general, is I'm very critical of the idea that religion is something else and that it should be judged as something else, and not that this is something that we've constructed ourselves, in terms of not in the literal sense of like Islam being man-made, but in the sense of just us saying, oh, you have a freedom of religion, and then acting like having a confessional community of some other way, whether ideological, Republican, it doesn't matter what you are, and then saying that this is not religion, when in practice, like if an alien came to Earth, they wouldn't be able to distinguish between what is a Democrat or a liberal party and what is a Muslim, right? They both have logos, they both have leaders, they both have texts, they both have heretics, right? And so I've started to realize that if I judged Islam as an ideology, it became more elucidating for me to realize, like, okay, now I can actually judge this. Now I can actually look at how the
Is it because you're familiar with looking at political ideologies?
Yes, and I think because you will never hear someone say, oh, well, like, the example I would give is like, no one ever says like, oh, well, there are bad Nazis, but Nazism is good. It just was never practiced right, you know? But for some reason, every time Nazism is practiced, white people want to kill people, to kill people of color, right? Like, it's like, okay, then you can't judge it based off of the ideology itself. You must judge it by the way that people behave.
Just to clarify for the listeners, we're not saying Muslims and Nazis are equivalent. That's
no.
Just because people will take that soundbite out of context. The context being, if an idea is never able to be implemented properly, it's not the fault of the recipients of the idea. It should have been designed better.
Exactly. Yeah. Even if Islam didn't like have the necessary like violent passages or problematic hadith, like even if that wasn't there, you still have to look at the system that Islam creates, or the system any ideology creates, and judge it and ask yourself if this is something that's actually good for like overall human
well-being.
For like human happiness, human potential. Does this actually help us in any way? And I think, and I wanted to mention something that Tree brought up in the call before the last one, which I thought was really good, because I actually have been doing a lot of research on the cultural aspect and how Islam has, removed cultures or replaced cultures. And I think one thing I've realized, I kind of came to an epiphany, is that I find that most Muslims find it very easy, I guess, or I would say people who question their Islam are able to, I find, easily move from Islam to atheism, partly because like I find it interesting that the things that Muslims defend Islam for the most are the things that make Islam so like difficult to like contend with in terms of making it secular or reformation, or even just like not having those blasphemy laws or other things that like.
Sorry, can you say that again? I'm a little slow right now.
Sure.
Yeah, please say that again.
Sure. So for example, I guess like one thing you hear a lot from like apologists is they'll say that, oh, Islam is the best religion because it's based off of submission to God and not based off of Christ, you know, a person or a tribe in terms of Judaism. Something that I hear a lot, but I'm like, that's interesting because most religions were based off of tribes. Christianity and Islam are actually the exception, right? But Islam thinks that everyone else, because they don't know anything. Let's be honest. Most Christians and Muslims do not know anything. They know barely anything about Judaism, and they don't know anything about most other religions. That's how religion was. It wasn't this, let's create an empire. It was, this is the belief of me and my people. Let's dance around the campfire and give this to our earth goddess. Okay, time for whatever else next, right? There was not this like, I mean, of course, I'm not saying this is across the board thing.
Islam is a little different though, right? I don't know if that happened after Muhammad died or not, but just given the narrative in the Quran alone, there was a lot of political, you know, stuff going on there that had to do with mobilizing people, right?
No, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I'm saying that is the case for Islam and Christianity. I'm saying that that's not the case for most other religions, like, or belief systems of peoples, I should say, historically, you know, like, there weren't very, like in the Americas, right? When the Europeans came, right? Like there wasn't this giant religion from Alaska to Chile. Like it wasn't like that, but that was the case in the Islamic world. And that is the case, or was the case, is in Europe as well, right? You had these two very large religions that were basically empires, right? So, so back to my point about like Muslims defending Islam. Islam is what I would call an extremely successful religion, right? It converted people very quickly. It destroyed and replaced many of the institutions that were there and made Islam the institution, right? And it solidified itself in the cultures in a way that Christianity didn't, right? Which I just find very interesting, because it's like, that's partly why we have this conversation of like, oh, is Islam compatible with democracy? Is Islam compatible? Well, like you have to realize Islam is a culture. It is. It's like, and
it guts the culture from the inside, I think. Like,
yeah,
it replaces the culture. I don't. Christianity, I'm sure, you know, gets into people's everyday lives too, but Islam is meant as a political system and the culture to follow. Like that's what you're supposed to emulate. So I don't think it's compatible with other people's cultures. Like at least you can't preserve a culture and the Islamic culture as well. They mesh together.
Exactly.
And Islam wins in many ways.
Exactly. Yeah, like I always find it interesting when like some apologists would say like, oh, like, you know, they say that like Islam can adapt to any culture, and I'm just like, you know, not everyone wears clothes, you know, and there's nothing wrong with not wearing clothing, you know, like you're not gonna go tell people who don't wear clothes because they don't need to, because they live on an island and it's hot, that they need to cover their hair, you know, like it's just completely absurd. Which again shows how, like, if we view it again as just like a cultural ideology, we show how much supremacy is in there, because Islam makes assumptions, and I think Christianity does this as well, about the people that you're going to. You know, they make assumptions that like these aren't pagans that live in Mecca. You know, these aren't pagans in Lithuania. These are people that are actually a little bit more like, they have other differences that you may not know about, that they don't know. These people already have their beliefs, they already have their way of life, they're not so interested in changing, you know. And maybe that works better for them depending on where they live, right? But they don't look at that. They just look at like, oh well, like we need to make you better the way we made those people better, which they didn't, but you know.
Yeah. Well, so to make sure that I understood you correctly, what you never really felt like you were a believer. Like from a very young age, you noticed that you're being an apologist with yourself and with other people. And I guess that was also causing identity issues with queerness and, you know, associating Islam with straightness, because it's an expected association to make, to be honest. It's
Yeah.
obviously, but I'm glad that you seem to be, at least out of that mindset or not too conflicted about it, I hope.
Yeah.
Would you say that you've got like the most difficult part is behind you at this point?
I would think so. Yes. And like in terms of being a believer, like, I mean, I don't know if it counts because I was a literal child, but like I was I was the poster boy for Islam when I was like a child, up until I was a teenager, basically. I was very like goody two shoes and, just really, but whatever. I was a child, So yeah, I think definitely, especially since, like I am very out, in every way. Like I'm very out about my queerness. I'm very out about being ex-Muslim and atheist. I have Muslim friends, and I tell them about my beliefs. And if they get offended, I'm like, well, I'm still going to be your friend, but I don't give a fuck, So, because my beliefs about Islam don't mean that I think any individual is like a bad person. It's just like I'm judging it based off of, like if you want to say that atheism is this terrible, they always say, oh, what about atheism? I'm like, I don't care if atheism is responsible for the deaths of a bunch of people. Sure. Like, I don't.
It's not that.
It's not. But if it was,
Yeah.
Yeah. If it was, I wouldn't care. I'm not, because I don't defend ideas. I defend people. And I would always defend Muslims, but I wouldn't sit there and die for an idea that exists in a book. It's just not. It just doesn't make sense for any idea.
There are ideas I would defend, but not to that extent, because I'm willing to accept that that idea is flawed and perhaps I need to switch ideas, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing about that. I don't have an idea I will defend to death, because you can't be set in your conclusions, especially from such a young age, just set in your conclusions and ready to die for it. Like that.
Yeah.
Maybe you could be right, but more often than not, you need to do a little bit more digging to be sure. And we can be sure that a lot of such people they have way more enthusiasm than their position deserves. But
I think if there's one other thing I think that really shook me, I mean, it's usually brought up every time I tell someone I'm ex-Muslim. They're always like, oh, because you're gay. I'm like, no. That's one of the reasons, but that's not the main reason, right?
Well, they tell me that, and I never said I was gay, but
Yeah. Yeah, that's the like I mentioned the main reason more or less already, but like the reason was I was trying to find queerness in Islam, and I found it, right? I found that there were examples of people that, okay, they obviously wouldn't use the same exact parameters or labels that we use today, but you had examples of, al-mukhannath, which is like what is like the eunuch or the natural eunuch. And I was like, okay, so there's this example of like whatever, third gender, blah, blah. But what really the kicker was, and this was the epiphany I had, was like, oh, like, and then like the story of Lot, right? Let me not get ahead of myself. So in terms of like the mukhannath, the idea of there being this, which is basically an idea of a man who is like not a man because he's not attracted to women for whatever reason, So they would behave like women, all this. So I was like, okay, so there's an example of queerness. But what I realized was, okay, so now that this queerness exists in Islam, it's like, all right, and you go where? Right next to women. I was like, this doesn't make the religion less patriarchal, I realized that even though there is a place for queer, like it exists, but the problem is that especially a lot of like Western Muslims, they see that and they think, oh, progress. I'm like, no, just because it looks like it's progressive doesn't mean it is, like
it's more than one box now, but it's still not like a good box to be in.
Exactly, it's still boxes, right? And so there's a case in like that's the case kind of in India where people are like, oh, like they're progressive because they accept a third gender. Like the Hijra in South Asia, you do know why they consider them like a third gender, because they're like, oh, because a woman, has a vagina and a man has a penis, and if you're not exactly that, third category. Like, no, you're not. That's not any different. Okay, yeah, then you're just queer
like
in the middle. Yeah, exactly. It's like you didn't do anything. All you did was create a new box. Now we have 3 boxes. Yay. Like you didn't do anything. So it made me realize that just because I find something in Islam that maybe is like a value that might line up with whatever Western value system we have today doesn't mean that's progress, doesn't mean it's good, and doesn't mean that cancels out everything else.
Yeah. And might is the key word, because, might, if you really squint hard and, just convince yourself that this interpretation is truly what Allah meant all along, then there's a slim chance. But I'm glad that you're able to get yourself out of all that confusion rather than just sit in it and try to find ways to do that for every single thing.
Yeah.
So, I'm glad that was your kind of part of your wake-up call, I suppose.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you calling in. And someone was saying, finally, there are a few people saying this. They were saying, finally, a queer ex-Muslim, yay. And just sharing how it wouldn't be easy for them to come out. So thank you for representing them in a way.
Thanks.
Yeah. And very silly. Yeah, it's Adam and Eve and not Adam and Steve. How annoyed are you when you hear that joke? Or
well, I guess it's like, well, it wasn't Adam and Eve either. Like it wasn't them either. It was whatever came beforehand. Well, if you go back far enough, it was just, cells replicating. So it was, I don't know, Eve was replicating herself there. Like there's no Adam and Eve either, right? Like
what was it? Mitosis, and what was the other one?
Meiosis. Yeah.
Meiosis. Which one's which?
I think meiosis is the reproductive. I think
one was like you need two cells, and one was just splitting or something like that.
Mitosis is just the splitting, yeah.
Mitosis is splitting. Is that gay?
Well, I think everything was one gender then. So, I mean, if that even matters, but sure, yes.
Right. Okay. We'll take that one for the queers. Yeah.
We just know it's haram. That's what we.
Don't do mitosis. That's haram. Yeah. Well, again, thank you very much for calling in. It was nice hearing from you.
Yes, thank you. Likewise.
Take care, Deda. Talk to you later.
Bye.
All right. So a big thank you all around to everyone who joined today. And I forgot to acknowledge this music guy, our moderator. You're doing more than enough, but thank you. The cats appreciate the treats, but they don't appreciate me delaying their food this long. And Notion, same thing. Thank you very much. I would like to give something to the kitties. Also, California girl, Zakat al-Fitr. Lots of cat puns. I should bring the cats more often. Mashallah, they come with their rizq. As soon as the cats showed up, the haram money started flowing in. Seriously though, I appreciate it. And I will make sure that the cats get a cut of that. A fifth, right? A fifth of the cut goes to the cats. Anyhow, thank you everybody who called in today. I thought this was going to be maybe a couple of hours or something, but there were a lot of callers today, and maybe a couple of them had to drop off. So I'm sorry if I couldn't get to you today, but in the next one, hopefully. And someone was saying how it is actually encouraging how there's so many people that the queue was all, filled up. That's how many people there are out there who want to talk about this. So you're not alone. So even if you didn't get to say anything, just know that someday you might, or someone else will say it for you. You will be represented. Anyhow, thank you everybody for joining today. I appreciate you being here. Take care and have a good one. Think critically and think for yourself.